in cycling, then it hurts the legs. This one, when you have to, race up in the final, like in the 4 days off Dunkirk, when the finish is up at the top, then it does hurt big time. But they're going to ride it at a tempo here, so everybody is going to get over without having to dig anywhere into their deep end, and they're just going to get all this climb and get that over as one of the climbs, one of the ones of the day. And I think the conditions as well, if it was really blowing in windy conditions, blowing in the right way, when you come off the climb here, then it would be more I think contested. But at the moment it looks like they're just going to ride this at an easy pace.
Ralph Micah just tucked in there. You've seen Tadej Pogacar, of course, wearing the Young Riders Classification jersey. Quick Step doing some work. Let's do these guys the honour of calling them home for the next kilometre. It is a bit longer. Some of it's been patched, as you can see, with asphalt, but largely speaking, that chattering sound, by the way, is the transponder slung underneath the seat of Magnus Cort, and it is wiggling away like crazy. It's complaining. A much better set one for Perez, it seems, but yeah, uncomfortable, but nothing too serious. We'll have far more of this tomorrow, Sean. I think that's still looming large in everyone's minds.
Well, tomorrow is a real difficult day for everybody. It's a concerning day, and anybody who is in the GC with a GC contender, they're going to be majorly concerned to try and get through tomorrow's stage. And today is a day, if we hadn't the stage tomorrow, we might see more action from maybe riders and teams wanting to get into the breakaway. But there's quite a lot of riders, I think, and their team keeping their powder dry for tomorrow's stage, because this is going to be a real nervous one. And it's not alone the difficulty of it, it's just the danger when you have all those cobbles, and we have a lot of very difficult sections, long sections, mechanical problems, crashes. All of that is going to be on the riders' minds, and to try and to stay out of danger. Tomorrow is a day where it's going to be difficult. We're going to see somebody having difficulty, and hopefully it's not in the very end that they can get back into the main peloton with all the favourites, but it's always a risky one.
Here we go, and Magnus Cort is coming through at the very death here. He wants that point. He doesn't want anyone else on the positive points listing for the King of the Mountains jersey competition. He's gone early. Oh, a little bit of a backslip there. Gear change issues for Perez by the looks of things. Picks it back up, has a look over his shoulder. Perez is coming back at him though. 200 metres, drops a bottle. The bidon's gone. A little bit of lightening of the load, you might say. This is a proper contest. This is fantastic. Cort still needs to kick on if he wants to make sure of it, and is just about going to get there, and does so. Goodness me, Sean, that was proper.
Wow, that was a sprint for 1 point, and I think maybe Magnus Cort just got it wrong a bit there. He didn't realise it was so far. I would think so, because there was no need to take it up that early. We know Magnus Cort, and we see there when he went, he came by Perez very quickly, but then he realised, oh, this is a long ways, the barrier is not appearing here, and he had to wait until he could see the barrier for quite a long time. So I think for both it proved to be a real difficult sprint for just 1 point in the mountain classification.
Well, I know this square very well, actually. Here is in Cassel. It's a strange one, actually. There's a massive garrison billeted outside of this town. I still worried about the Brits coming, the English coming back in particular, coming back over the water. That was feisty, Dan. I loved that.
It was. I'm surprised you recognised that square in the sunshine, but still. Yeah, interesting, that sprint, because it was actually Perez who started sprinting to the line very, very early indeed, out of the saddle though, whereas you noticed that Magnus Cort was responding in the saddle because you get extra grip. We could see Perez's back wheel just skipping all over the place, struggling to find grip, and the only point at which Cort Nielsen really got out of the saddle was when there was a couple of repairs to the road, a little bit of tarmac that he knew he'd have enough grip on to be able to accelerate out of the saddle and not have his back wheel skipping around all over the place. So he clearly had more power, but he played it more clever in terms of how he rode his bike, but it was still a long way to go to the top. I think he thought in his head he'd probably get that easy, but unfortunately for him, every time he looked around, Perez was still there.
Yeah, until his bidon got chucked, and I think that sort of distracted Perez just a little bit there. Sure,
Lightened the load, though.
it did, yeah.
Yes, it certainly lightened the load, but I don't think Perez, he just hadn't. As we could see there, it looked like he was coming back to Magnus Kurt's wheel, and he just knew he had him there and he had it under control. But yeah, surprising that he didn't just stay in the wheel of Perez, leave him ride for a while, and then just come over the top in that final 50, 100 metres. He made it difficult for himself, to get that point. And it was a one that I wasn't expecting, that sort of action there for just little point gain on the polka dot jersey classification.
Well, I guess he's kind of used to winning them all. He just wants to keep it going, and he still missed 100%. There are, however, 5 climbs remaining. We've got an intermediate sprint coming up as well, and that will be contested by the secondary race that we've got at the moment. The points competition, Sean, is going to be a long and feistily fought one, and at the moment it's there's still a lot of points up for grabs, although they've been a bit mean at the end today. Only 30 points in the green jersey competition, as opposed to the run to Neuburg on stage 2 and 3 to Zonderburg. There was 50 for the winner on each of those days. Only 30 today, though.
Yes, well, I think this is called in English it's a lumpy stage, and they give less points of that, of course, and as we go into the mountain stages there's less again, and that's the way the regulations are, and that's the way the points are giving out. But
it is 50 today, sorry guys, but it's a coefficient of 2, so the opening 2 stages are a coefficient of 1, but both 1 and 2 have the 50 down to 2 points for the first 15 rides. Only once you get to coefficient 3 that it goes down to 30 for the winner.
Well, that's our misreading of the rules this morning, I have to say. Apologies. We assumed it was... I did wonder, Sean, for such a day that's, all right, tough, quick men may well have their fun, but... well, we'll double treble check, but we'll go with that at 50 today. 4 minutes and 39, and somebody's brought a flare. Why do they do that, Dan?
Flares, why? Don't know. Still, though, some cycling websites like to show the pictures with the flares, which doesn't really help. But there was one spectator that stayed on the road there that one of the riders from Ineos had to dodge at the very last minute. So, that was the great thing about the humongous volume of spectators in Denmark. There was very little of that, and let's hope it's the same today from now on.
Yeah, well, they were self-policing, weren't they, which was fantastic. Didn't see a policeman at all. It was just great respect for the riders. Here's Peter Sagan just making sure that he gets up towards the floor. I loved the way he rode the day before our rest day on stage 3, and I'm convinced he's going to go extremely well today. His feistiness at the end with the finger jabbing towards Wout van Aert, who thought he'd crushed him towards the barriers. No foul, no favour, it seemed, on that particular day. No sanctions offered up to Wout van Aert, but Peter Sagan clearly thought there was an issue. It's his positioning skills, though, that are hyper-dramatic and indeed effective. And he came into the wind at just the right time, but unfortunately just was squeezed towards the barriers, something he's been known to offer up to others in the past as well, also without sanction. So, you take the rough with the smooth, Sean, when it comes to sprinting.
Yes, and talk about sprinting, my apologies, it was I who read the regulations wrong, just skipped over them too quickly, but yeah, it is 50, and it's another day for the sprinters here, and it looks like that is, it's going to be one of those finals, but again, you never know how much is going to kick off at any point in the race.
I love to see who it is that's been given the helper's duty for the day, and they're already being displayed to us down on every single one of these little climbs. You want to preserve as much energy with your principal as you possibly can, and every little helps.
It's quite interesting the way that Quick-Step are riding. I said it would only be Baggioli, but not only was I wrong on that again, Catania now riding on the front, but he's riding very hard here, 4 minutes and 35 seconds. So they've taken 2 minutes out of the gap of our leading 2 riders. We saw how fast they went up the last part of the climb. There's clearly a plan in place for this team, but interestingly, there's a couple of their riders, including Mikel Honoré, who are hovering towards the back and almost look like they're struggling ever so slightly. But this is a determined effort on this descent. And, of course, Seneschal in second place, he knows this part of the world very well. He's been in Dunkirk many times, racing the 4 days, which is actually a 6-day race. They're pressing on now, and this is going to increase the nerves of everybody in this group.
And you can see who's also up there in his Grenadiers, Sean. A team that's been quiet so far. Is it a day for them to go loud?
Well, this is an interesting one, you know, with Quick-Step pushing on so much here, and then you see other riders, you know, down in the rear end of the peloton. You'd wonder why they're doing this, and you know, at this point in the stage, do they want to maybe just kill off this breakaway in a number of kilometres? I find it difficult to exactly what the tactic is.
I'm just wondering, we've got 3 level crossings today, and there's one coming up. Maybe there's a train coming.
You can see Luke Rose straight on the radio. He's always very aware of what's going on, and he's got Geraint Thomas on his wheel, but I'm not sure where the other 2 leaders of that team, Adam Yates and Martinez, are. And he'll probably be on the radio saying, look, Quick-Step are absolutely drilling things on the front. You need to make sure that you get it if you can. Already there are splits in the front part of that group.
Let's have a look. I'm just looking at the trees here as well to see if the wind has indeed picked up. We were kind of worried that it may well ebb and flow today. Still 2 over the road, but by a narrowed margin. They found 2 minutes very, very quickly upon them. And the team that are bossing proceedings just for now, Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl, who've had their own issues. And if you get a problem, you can get caught out, Dan.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's had a mechanical problem or if he was just caught napping at the back of the peloton. Stephen Kruijswijk here, number 13, upside down on both his numbers at the back. But there are going to be some riders in trouble with the way that Quick-Step are riding. We saw a few riders hovering at the back from that very team, and there's even some splits here in the main peloton. I think the green jersey of Fabio Jakobsen is up towards that front group, but you can just see by the long string of riders, even Wout van Aert in the yellow jersey there, he's been caught out for the time being. It will come back together. Maybe they're thinking that there's a bit more wind than was forecast. They will have had people up the road looking at how strong the wind was, but they're not holding back here. You can tell by the body language.
Yeah, well, you can also tell by the bunting is a flap at the side of the road as well. Clearly, some wind being funneled here, and everyone trying to
teams want to be on the front, and as you can see here, it's just changing all the time, and in the meantime the gap is coming down. Maybe that's what the Quick Step team want to do. They don't want to ride for too long, but just make it nervous, and then that will just, you know, keep the pace really high on the front of the peloton, and the advantage to our two breakaway men is not going to go out. If anything, is going to come down.
Well, if we thought that this was going to be quite benign today, then think again. It's getting very, very nervy. Don't forget as well, everybody, we've got an intermediate sprint coming up in quite short order. That's with 108 kilometres to go, so rudimentary maths tells you in 22k's time. However, let's see how they approach it, because if this goes on, there might be some tired legs and certainly some nervous minds, Dan.
Could well be. Could well be. Everyone's fully concentrated at this point. I think after a two-man break went up the road, 6 minutes, everyone's laid back, comfortable. They'll just wait for the last few climbs and see what happens. But to reiterate again, you only need to have one team that does something like Quick Step did, and all of a sudden everyone's like, right, that's how it is it? We'll make sure that we're at the front, so the nerves have risen again. But I really don't get it, why they did that, and they've got two of their riders out the back, and I've not read anything to say that they're ill or injured or otherwise. Michael Murko and Mikel Honoré here, and a bunch of other riders. No one of huge consequence, you know, apart from those two in terms of lead-out duties later on, but everybody's now going to be very nervous at the front of that peloton, and they've almost halved the gap to our two leaders.
Well, Krieger's here, I believe, and he is one of the main men for Jesper Philipsen a little bit later on. So that's going to have a knockback effect for him potentially. Let's see. Rolling through, and these guys divorced from the peloton for the time being. They won't like that, Sean.
No, they'll not like it at all.
No.
And you know, when you go up the climb of the Cassel and you see the way the peloton was riding, you were expecting just to ride over and then, you know, get the downhill and, you know, continue on riding this steady pace, and suddenly a team just really, you know, goes for it and breaks it up, and you find yourself in the very end of the peloton in a split, and then you're trying to get back in there. They'll not be happy, but you know, that is the danger when you have a climb. It's riding along slowly. You have to always be in a position where you're ready to take control, and that means in the 20, 30 top places, and especially when there's a climb with cobblestones, just, you know, be safe. And yeah, those riders, you know, after getting caught out here, and this will make the day more nervous again, because they'll say, well, you know, will it happen again later in the day? So it just will go on, I think, and they'll be pushed to pace a bit more than we were expecting here now, which is good.
Well, this is fantastic. I'm so pleased that this is the way the day is panning out, because it could be a constant repeat of this kind of scenario between the climbs. We've only had one categorised climb dealt with today. There's 5 more still to come. We've got an intermediate sprint coming up in short order in about 20 kilometres time, but nonetheless a lot of points up for grabs. That competition is potentially one that's going to be wide open today. Apologies if we misdirected some of you. It's 50 points today. It is indeed 50 points up for grabs. I was a bit surprised that it had been trimmed back, but it was our error. 50 points then at the line, but plenty, of course, in the intermediate as well, Sean. I don't think they'll catch the two out front. I think the gap now is a comfortable one, but look at those who are at the back of that split. It's a more or less 25-second margin. Looks like, I'm not quite sure how historical that is, but it looks like we've just displayed as two pelotons. This is a reassembly. One of the teams that was caught out, by the way, was Education Easy Post. You saw Rigoberto Urán just being picked out. They've had to do a lot of work in this race and have had some ill fortune. Of course, they've got Magnus Cort making sure that there's a positive, of course, scenario around them. On the blower, Geraint Thomas with a smirk upon his face, now that hostilities seem to have ebbed, and they'll be welcoming this calm. Sitting at the back, Sean, we often talk about riders who do, and towards the rear on a number of occasions has been Wout van Aert today. He's asking for a bottle right now, but clear. I'm not going to question his levels of experience, because he's just magical. He's one of those guys that hovers at the back and then all of a sudden he's out front winning the damn thing. You never know quite how to read him. He reads the day very well, is what I'm trying to say, so don't besmirch him too much for hovering at the back, but it's a dangerous place for others.
Well, it's always a dangerous place, and we've just seen, the way it can become dangerous from a relatively calm peloton before that. But some riders, they have the feeling of the race, and they know when they have to be in the front and be in a good position. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a downtime now, all back together again, and we can see the front of the peloton. Line a rider across the road, and it seems like that everybody is happy just to calm the ship.
I was wondering if this was more about the chat than the bottle down. He's been back to the car so many times. It's do we need to worry?
I'm not sure what's going on there. We certainly haven't seen him do the same thing over the first two road stages of this race, and something's clearly not quite right. Otherwise, he wouldn't feel the need to go back and either talk to his team car or get another bottle or whatever it might be. Still this group trying to get back on. I was reading reports on the official Tour tracker that Van der Poel was off the back. I can only assume that he was in the other group that we've just seen latch back onto the main peloton. This is the one that's at 3:54, so they've only got, 17 seconds now to make up, and they'll get back onto that group that's calmed down now. But yeah, I mean, a bit of excitement for us to talk about, which we weren't expecting, which is always nice. But you're right, they'll be having to start to rev it up for the intermediate sprint soon, because they won't catch the two out front. But that does mean that the first across the line from the main bunch will add 15 points to their tally.
Well, Trek Segafredo riders as part of this group as well. If I'm not St. Phoenix, I beg your pardon. So yeah, it was Alexander Krieger, one of the lead-out men. Didn't see if Ed Plankett was there as well for Jasper Philipsen. We'll be happy to do something later on. Sean, you were besmirching them a little bit, but quite rightly too. That Alpecin Deceuninck, they often hide. Well, today they got found out, and their hidey hole, I'm afraid,
we could see them in full view.
Yes, we could.
In the wrong place.
Exactly that.
Yes, well, there was a lot of riders there that I think were really surprised that the peloton that pushed on at such a pace and got caught out. And Van der Poel, we know that he's a rider that he can sit at the rear a lot, and then when he decides to take it up, he just comes to the front. But I think the GC men, that's where you have to be careful. You cannot afford to slip too far back and find yourself in a split and then having to make that effort to get back in there. But that is something, experience is very important. But sometimes the best experience in the world, you can still get caught out, because it looks like everything is very calm, and you say, okay, I'm going to just go back in the peloton, maybe go back to the team car, and for some reason the team takes it up. And the reason why it was taken up, that's the question, because with Quick-Step, the way they were driving it on there, I still don't understand what was the plan there and why did they do that.
Well, who knows? And we often ask questions about those who do hover around at the back. It's a dangerous area to be, and we've seen so many get criticised for it. Ethan Hayter himself, of course, of late has been one of those that's come in for a lot of criticism. But I'm worried about Wout van Aert. There was a sort of a calming little pat on the back there, as if there was an issue. That's the fourth time he's been back to the car. Four minutes, so that drive has at least calmed for the time being. It looks like a few.
One small step for man.
A few more are taking a comfort break, so there's a bit of an accord. Nobody's going to attack at a moment such as this, and so calm is going to wash over us yet again. Sean, on behalf of the riders, I'm a bit relieved, and this is going to help those that were off the back. They'll get back in.
Yes, they will get back in, but I think they were just about back in anyway, so they've had to make the effort. And when you get back in, then suddenly it slows down. You say, why did they not slow down 10 kilometres or 5 kilometres earlier? And you would not have had to ride as much. But yeah, you can see there are a lot of riders stopping here, so it's all back to calm again. But this little open pace here is going to make us nervous and make everybody aware. The riders, careful. You have to stay to the front today. Today is a day where you never know what some of the teams will try and do. So
results at this race. You know, again, not to do them a disservice. That most of the riders within that squad will have won pro races at some point, but when you put them in a lineup of the Tour de France like this, which is just so strong, you do think, well, your best chance of getting publicity for B&B Hotels is to get up the road and be on television. That said, we're talking about them anyway because they're not up the road, so maybe they're thinking, well, if we don't do what we're supposed to do, everyone will talk about us anyway and we'll get an equal amount of publicity.
They do have a sprinter in Luca Mozzato, but you wouldn't say he's one of the favourites for the stage. But you're wondering why it was calming down a minute ago. Bit of a headwind for the next couple of Ks, but that's about to change again. Hello everybody watching on the television. Rob Hatch with you for the next little while alongside Sean Kelly and Daniel Lloyd at stage 4 of the Tour de France. And Delacourt at the moment, because he's there again. Magnus Cort at the head of the race. This time he's got some companies with Anthony Perez. They attacked right from the gun yet again, leaving Dunkirk. We've gone inland with a nice tailwind start up Mont Cassel of 4 days of Dunkirk fame. And we've had so far an average of 44.81 kilometres per hour. They had over 6 minutes of a gap, touching on 7 at one point. But that was knocked down rather quickly. Quick Step Alpha Vinyl really starting to push on the descent from Mont Cassel. A little bit of crosswind. We've turned around ever so slightly, heading northwest into the direction of the wind. But there's a left turn coming up at the moment when we get to this natural park. We've just gone in the Pas-de-Calais region, changing from the Département du Nord, going through Saint-Omer very soon. And any exposed sections for the next, well, what are we talking? 15 kilometres or so until we get to the intermediate sprint at Limbre will all be crosswind. So keep your eyes open. It's very early, but we did see a few riders get caught out. Calm has returned for now, however. There's Rafał Majka on the left-hand side, Maciej Bodnar, the two Poles, Luke Rowe, and Bahrain on the right-hand side, one of the teams who were trying to take advantage of that little split that had been caused. So keep your eyes. It's calm for now. Let's see what Bradley's noticed back in the peloton.
Yeah, I'm just stopped at the side of the road here as the peloton come through. We were up with the breakaway, but we were getting reports that Wout van Aert kept slipping back. You see this Chris Froome just going through there. A couple of the Ineos boys back there now. We have gone past that 30-kilometre boys marker, so that everyone can now feed. But it has settled down a bit now. We were on such big roads before that. When Quick Step, I think it was Alpha Vinyl that rode on the front here. Lots of guys taking the opportunity. These guys are all coming back from before, actually. Some of them have stopped for a wee, some of them to come back for bottles and things. But it has took, now we turned into a bit of a forest area. And it has turned into a headwind, so come back for the wind is blowing today, and if it gets in the right direction, as we saw before, it won't take much to split this thing. So a little bit erratic in the peloton today, actually. The choppers are coming in now as well. It's kicking up a lot of pollen in the air as well. You probably won't be able to see it on the cameras. But yeah, it's a funny one today, real funny one. So that breakaway now has moved out a little bit more, and it has settled down once again in the peloton. But it just shows you how delicate it is now in this situation, particularly in this region here. Lefts and turn, lefts and rights, and any moment a team could line it out, and it can shred out as we saw before there. So early in the stage, already a lot to think about really, and there's a little bit nervousness back in the peloton now. There's not so much talking as there was a bit before here now. People realise that there is some moments where it can be quite dangerous, and everyone has to stay on their toes a little bit. So lots more to come in this stage, I think, and I will keep you informed now. I've dropped to the back of the peloton now just to keep an eye on things and try and catch some information about Wout van Aert and see if he does indeed have a problem, or if he's just playing it Mr. Cool in his yellow jersey. I'll hand you back to the commentary team now.
Top stuff, Brad. Thank you, as observant as ever. Meantime, Bora Hansgrohe here on the left-hand side. You can see there are exposed sections, and I heard you wondering out loud, Sean, a minute ago as to what was going on. And again, it's calmed down, but you can see that the wind is blowing in the right direction. It is exposed, so you can understand why somebody tried, albeit a long, long way out from the finish.
Yes, although when you have a break out front, you know, of two riders and they have a nice advantage of, was it 6 minutes plus when we came over Mont Cassel there, the Côte Cassel, and I think a lot of teams and the riders will be saying, okay, it's going to be calm now for quite a long time today, and you know, you just relax a bit and you know, you start talking to riders beside you, and you can slip back very quickly and you can find yourself in the final 30-40 riders of the peloton, and then for some reason a team kicks on and you find yourself in a split because the riders up front, maybe they're not able to go downhill as well, and you have to chase for 10 kilometres, and you know, that creates a bit of nervousness in the peloton, and I think that's the reason we've seen. And when we get through the sprint point as well, it does turn left, and you know, it turns quite a lot, so direction is changing a lot, so I think that's going to, you know, keep it pretty nervous now for the rest of this stage.
Well, it's an interesting watch for us as we take a look into the heart of the French countryside. We're just switching on. We are in France now at stage 4 of the Tour. And we're in the north of the country. That wind varying all the time, isn't it? Look at those flags, completely limp, really. As Bradley said, though, it is getting up in places. I was looking at the forecast rather excitedly yesterday afternoon, preparing for this stage and marking down where the wind was going to come from.
Top quality tools from Japan. Top quality tools proved by 80 years of history. Our name is Daijet. Daijet is Japanese carbide tool manufacturer. From compounding carbide powder to cutting tools, we always manufacture by integrated production. That makes it possible to provide high quality.
The disappointing thing is the forecast right on the coast, on the real exposed section for the last 20 kilometres or so, is for the wind to really die off as the afternoon goes on. It's a shame because it's in the perfect direction as a cross tail. Well, while we're waiting, let's go for some stories.
First message, don't mess with Rigo. Certainly entering into the spirit of Denmark on Sunday there. And is there anything that Mathieu van der Poel can't do? Well, I think we've just proved that there is.
Green, 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 greenish! Yes! Moment! Justice! He's back!
Kom mooi, hè? Kan je? Top. Kwast, man.
Fought all in, given everything, made the best win. It's all about right, but it's entertaining. On the bells dancing, now they're screaming from the side to hear Pogačar singing.
You see, I'm not convinced that they are singing from the sidelines to hear him sing, but we'll find out on a straw poll at the end of the Tour. And that's a lovely image from the Tour. With you with all my heart, Papa. First taste of the cobbles. We've had another taste of them today, and they'll be back again tomorrow. And a rest day. That meant that Intermarché Wanty-Gobert were able to enjoy a barbecue together.
Thanks, Jono. I've made it now. I'm on Spotify. They used a little clip of our commentary in that rap video. Bas Tietema of Tour de Tietema. You've heard of his little stories and his fantastic return to racing at the start of the year. With Bingo, well, he's been busy acting as music producer. So there you go.
They didn't use my rap that I submitted.
Did you submit a rap?
No, I didn't.
Oh, disappointing. Lloydie's Got Talent. Apparently.
There's something I've never heard before.
You haven't had Simon Cowell around, have you? Well, 116 Ks to go, and we've got the King of the Mountains up the road again today. King of the Hills country. The gap's gone up to almost 6 minutes again. This is a strange start to the stage today. And just look at the teams that are at the front as well. Not too many are just the sprinters teams. Ineos Grenadiers are obviously very wary of something happening. And we're approaching the intermediate sprint at Limbre. In the meantime, Jonathan.
Well, we are going to go past lots of churches, we're going to go past lots of abbeys. We always do as we wend our way through this part of the French countryside. This one, the Abbey de Notre-Dame. Oh, was this the, I'm just getting a little muddled up. I'm taking a quick. This is the St. Paul's Abbey. I do beg your pardon. We've got another abbey coming up in just a few kilometres' time, which is Notre-Dame de Visque. This particular one we were just seeing there, that was founded in 1889, and the nuns moved the monks out of the monastery, so it became a convent, and then the monks came back in. Everyone was driven out by the anti-Catholic laws back in 1909. All of the monks and nuns at that stage forced into exile just over the border, not Boredom, sorry, that really was a Freudian slip, in Belgium. And so then the Benedictine tradition became founded in that area of Belgium before making its way back into France, in northern France.
Thanks, Jono. Perez and Magnus Cort. Daniel, I understand you've got a bit of quick stat on Magnus Cort's recent performance.
Yes, it came from Cafe Roubaix on Twitter, actually, that he's just equalled in winning that first KOM today a 64-year-old record. Federico Bahamontes won the first 7 classified climbs of the Tour de France that year, and it's never been done since. But Magnus Cort Nielsen, the only person that's won a King of the Mountains at this Tour, and he's equalled a very old record.
That's one thing you'd never thought you'd hear. Magnus Cort climbing like the Eagle of Toledo. How about that? Federico Bahamontes, one of the legends of Spanish cycling. But here he goes again, in the breakaway again. And again, I was a little dumbfounded this morning as to why nobody else is going on the attack. I know the Tour's long, but there are certain teams that perhaps could do with being a little bit more realistic of what their aims are at this particular Tour. And the reason as to why they are. And the only thing I could think of as well, Dan, is, you know, teams like UNO-X sitting at home who were desperate to be at the Grand Depart in Denmark and will have been noticeably disappointed given the fact that they've performed better than B&B Hotels in the last few years, and they'd have been loved to attacking the race today.
They would love to be attacking it, and I'm sure they would be. They're such a quality team, though, that they may well have ambitions themselves over the types of climbs that we've got today. So it might have been that we didn't see them in the breakaway. I never really know how early ASO and RCS actually know in their heads who they're going to select for their big races, the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France. It might be that it comes a little bit earlier than it's what actually is released to the public, and might have been that B&B Hotel were selected by ASO a little bit before we found out about it. But they also do have to look after the French side of things as well, just as RCS do for the Italian teams, and in particular in Italy, where we don't have any World Tour teams left. You need to give the teams who are still there the opportunity. Now, whilst that's not the case in France, we've still got a number of French World Tour teams, Cofidis who are up the road, AG2R, Groupama, etc. I think for the teams that are even in the second division of the sport, ASO would like to look after them and ensure that they keep as many French teams and therefore French riders in the race as possible, because, you know, we see the big Grand Departs elsewhere, and how many people come out to support it. It has become much more international, but you don't want it to become so international that the French lose interest in their own race, and it's only international people that are very interested in it.
Yeah, I guess it's a delicate balance, a very delicate one indeed. But I was thinking of Uno-X in particular just because of the Grand Départ in Scandinavia and the fact that, yes, they're a big Norwegian setup, but they've got a lot of strong Danish riders and some of the strongest in the whole peloton, as we see our peloton stringing out a little. A scramble for the school gates to see what's happening outside. Well, they don't get that every day. And bonjour le tour indeed. L'école Enclos Notre-Dame. Teachers and students saying hello. We wait for those exposed sections again coming out of Saint-Omer, which is where we are right now. That's the remains of the Abbey of Saint-Bertin. Back in the day, it was obviously a stunning building. Not many in this part of the world left in ruins, however. Notre-Dame. Notre-Dame de Visque on stage 4 of this Tour de France. We're in France after the 24th foreign start of the Tour was in Denmark this year, the first since the start of the COVID pandemic. And as we're back on French road, we have the French crowds back. Magnus Cort was used to the big Danish crowds the other day, and the Vikings in the break once more. Here he is in his polka dot jersey as the king of the mountains so far. He has a Frenchman from the south of the country, Anthony Perez, in front of him. A man from Toulouse in the red and white jersey. And look at the applause here as Cofidis are on home roads today. A French team from this particular region of the country. You can just see those flags. Those who've been able to get over on the Euro tunnel on the ferry are bringing the British flags as well. And this one of the uncategorized climbs of the day that Carlton was talking about early on. A little bit of a rise here before we descend down into Lumb. .6:18. Sean's gone off to get a little bit of a spot of lunch, by the way. He'll be on and back with us later on. And Lloyd's still with me for now, and we'll be joined by Adam Blythe soon. On a nice sunny day. We've been treated to good weather apart from that opening day. Tomorrow, Dan, I think, is the day that everybody worried about the weather, though.
Yes. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be fairly nice all week, though, doesn't it? But that won't reduce the nerves too significantly, I wouldn't imagine, for tomorrow's cobbled stage. It's not as arduous as Paris-Roubaix, of course, but when you've got so many different riders that want to be at the front, it's going to be one where everyone's still going to be nervous no matter what the weather or wind conditions are out there on the day. I'll be interested to see, though, going back to what's on our screens right now, as to whether any of the teams behind use that climb in any way ahead of the intermediate sprint that's to come. It's just under 5Ks, isn't it, between the top of it and the intermediate sprint itself, but it's a fairly quick descent. So, you know, Quickstep have already tried something. I think everybody's going to be very alert to them trying something again, but with 15 points on offer and quite a few riders and teams interested in that green jersey competition, you wonder whether any of them will start to ignite things on that uncategorised climb. Unlikely. I was maybe clutching at straws here, but when you look at the actual profile, the climb that they've just taken on, these two front riders, is not much less than some of the categorised climbs.
Yes, it does seem difficult to make a selection, doesn't it? I mean, we could say that about any bike race. There is obviously certain sections that are going to have the sponsors' boards placed on them and the points given out. We obviously focus on the categorised climbs, but that never tells the whole story, does it? As we see the riders ready to make the descent into Lumb. It's very, very calm back here.
Yeah.
And not one team has taken it up again. 6 minutes 24 and growing. And I was talking about the wind before. Again, admittedly, I was talking in very clutching at straws fashion like you were a moment ago. We did see that little action, and I did have a look at where the wind was blowing. After the intermediate sprint, we're going to turn left, and we're going to head into a tailwind. Then we'll have a little bit of crosswind section around 10 kilometres down the road, but then it's mainly headwind until we get to the coast itself, and that takes us into the final 20k. So for anybody getting too excited maybe, or trying to get excited about the possibility of crosswinds as the stage goes on, we can probably dampen those little bits of excitement, I think, because it isn't exactly exposed. But there are little twists and turns and changes of direction, and as you saw, Dan, it only takes one team to get the party started, and everybody has to follow, don't they? Even if it wasn't in their plans.
Exactly that. It just puts everybody else on tenterhooks if they see somebody trying something, because you get to the point on a lot of stages where you're like, right, can settle down now, I know what's going to happen, we're going to just ride at a steady tempo behind the breakaway, then we need to be alert for the final climbs in case something happens there. When a team does something much earlier than anybody's expecting, then everyone has to be on red alert from there on in, just in case they or another team decides to try and do something again. I mean, when you look at the roads, they have been unlucky, the organisers, that the wind just isn't blowing strong enough really to create any echelons or any splits in the bunch. And as you said before, Rob, not only is there not much wind right now, it dies off even more once you get towards 5 o'clock. So even though they're heading down the coast into Calais, unlikely that the wind's going to have any bearing on the race at that particular point, because in the forecast that I've looked at on Windfinder, it's down to a constant speed of 6 kilometres per hour, the wind, with gusts of 7. So I don't think it's going to have much of a bearing on the race. And it's one of those things, isn't it? You can, as you and I have both done, and everyone else that's commentating or presenting or punditing on this race will have done, you look at the overall parkour and you think, wow, it's a really well-designed one this year, and anything can happen in those opening stages in Denmark and into Calais, then the cobblestones into the Arenberg tomorrow. But there just hasn't been the wind, or at least it hasn't been in the right direction so far. So we've still had that action towards the end for the sprint finishes. We're guaranteed that again today, plus the prospect of somebody really igniting things on the climbs that come a little bit later today than we had in Denmark. But in terms of the wind, it's just not played ball for the organisers so far.
No, you'd have to say the design of the course has been perfect.
Yeah.
Possibility, if the natural elements were at play, would have been fantastic. This is the design that's leading us into the sprint, and we're going to see 20 points and 17 points given out to either Anthony Perez or Magnus Cort in one of the two particular orders possible. Behind, no one's interesting at all yet. It's a Sunday coffee ride pace here. 6 minutes 37. Interesting for when the bunch does get back. You've got this little uphill drag as well. This will take us into what? 300 metres to the line there. Only now does it flatten up with 280-270 to go. Even later, in fact. And then it kicks up again a little bit. 200 to go. It's Perez who's at the front. You imagine that Magnus Cort won't be too interested in this. This could help the cohesion of the two if Perez is allowed to take the maximum points here. He'll carry on riding, they won't even contest it. So 20 points and 17 points, respectively, going to Anthony Perez in the red and white there for Cofidis, and Magnus Cort behind, who takes those 17. But of course, he already has his prize. If you're just switching on, you're just joining us, we've had one King of the Mountains prize so far today. And that 1 point has gone to Magnus Cort. That means mathematically, as long as he finishes the stage, he yet again, whatever happens in the rest of the day, will be in the King of the Mountains jersey. 5Ks to the sprint here. An out-of-season, an off-season ride for Tom Pidcock and Mathieu van der Poel, the two cyclocrossers, sitting at the back, shooting the breeze. Oh, it's nice and easy. Blowing a little bit, but feeding time even as well. Don't think I've rarely seen it so calm heading into a few kilometres before a sprint. Here they come onto that climb then, Dan.
Yep, and nothing's happening at all, is it? And you can see we've picked out in the graphics there Wout van Aert in the yellow jersey, Fabio Jakobsen in the green, who's got Michael Mørkøv just behind him, but the rest of his teammates currently absent. Seneschal, you can see on the top left of your screen the blue, white and red of national champion of France, but very calm considering they must have, what, about 4 minutes left to go until they're going to get to that intermediate sprint. And there are a fair chunk of points still on offer, so we will get a big old fight for those remaining points. But as things stand, no one's lit the afterburners.
Let's take a look at where we are in the points classification then, heading into the halfway point of stage 4 of this Tour de France. There's Geraint Thomas towards the back of the bunch at the moment. There isn't too much worry for anybody out there right now. But the riders who want to take the green jersey on the Champs-Élysées in Paris are going to have to be alert in the next 3 or 4 Ks or so. Wout van Aert, of course, is in the yellow jersey leading the general classification, but he's also in the lead in the green jersey classification. He has 107 points after his 3 second places so far, and a couple of victories at intermediate sprints as well. That is a 17-point lead over the man who wears the green today. That is Fabio Jakobsen. Next man on 60 points is Dylan Groenewegen. He, of course, won the stage to great fanfare on Sunday. Nice to see after we'd previously talked about Jakobsen's obvious physical and mental struggles. Very much the latter for Dylan Groenewegen, and a nice story to see him back after what has obviously been a ridiculously hard couple of years for him as well. Peter Sagan's in 4th place on 54 points, and Magnus Cort, well, he's just added to his 42 points there, taking 17, moving him up now.
Or Jakobsen or Caleb Ewan, yes, they might well take the big points for you, but there's an almost equal chance that they might not take any at all for you. So he's been incredible, Wout van Aert.
He has been incredible. Now then, the pace is starting to come up a little bit.
Incredible, Wout van Aert.
Of course, we're on our way into the intermediate sprint here with 15, 13 and 11 the next 3. But of course, the points go down to 15 places in these intermediate sprints at the Tour de France. This is Saint-Omer and its church. And the pace now noticeably up. Still nobody making that sort of arrow ahead at the front. You can just see that Caleb Ewan has been put into place in the red jersey. Peter Sagan is on the right-hand side of the picture, right at the top there. There's the locals' contribution. But this is up beyond the sprint point, 7 minutes and 3 seconds up the road. It's a nice healthy lead for Perez and Cort. You just get the feeling that as soon as they start to put things together behind, they'd be able to bring them back at will. There's a long, long way to go yet today's stage, and the majority of the lumpy part of the stage is still coming as well. Got about 1,800 metres of climbing over the course of the 174 Ks today. Most of that yet to be done. Lumpy terrain begins straight after this climb, really. So 800 metres then to the sprint. Let's have a look.
It doesn't look like 800 metres to a sprint, does it?
I'm doing my best to build it up here. You can see the green jersey, Fabio Jakobsen, of course, with that jersey on loan, as I just said, sitting on the wheel now of Wout van Aert, who's on the right-hand side. Van Aert himself being looked after at the front. Left-hand side, Christophe Laporte is the man doing that looking after. Through the centre in the white jersey, Maciej Bodnar, Polish time trial champion for the 8th time in his career. Up there ahead of Peter Sagan. 500 metres to the sprint now. Trying to look for everybody else interested. Left-hand side, Seneschal moves up. And here we go. Mørkøv now on the left as we look at it. Right now sitting on the wheel of Jakobsen. Now he's going to maybe move up onto the right-hand side. Sagan has chosen to try and fight for the wheel of Jakobsen. Now we know, I think, why Mørkøv was sitting there on the wheel of Jakobsen. It means that it's more difficult now for Sagan to come round, and we're 100 metres from that sprint. Jakobsen on the left as we look at it in the green. And, well, he will take the points. 2 points down, taking 13 will be Wout van Aert. Ewan not even really too interested there, just picking up the scraps at the end. And, well, Didn't really see too much of a contest at all. Not anybody really wanting to open up the engine there, Dan.
Didn't appear that way, did it? But you were right. Michael Mirko just making sure that Peter Sagan couldn't get onto the wheel of Fabio Jakobsen. And he also managed to press on and ensure that Sagan got slightly fewer points by finishing ahead of him once he crossed the line. So you can see him in the blue, Michael Mirko, behind the green jersey there of Fabio Jakobsen. Peter Sagan not fighting particularly much to get round him before that point, and in the end settling for 4th place of the bunch there.
By my reckoning, that will take him to either 10 or 9 points. There's Laporte, left-hand side. He drifts back. Van Aert knowing he does enough to just lose the 2 points there to Fabio Jakobsen, and that means that it will be a 15-point lead now for Wout van Aert ahead of Fabio Jakobsen in that green jersey classification. There is, of course, the potential for all that to change yet again on the finish, as Dan's already said today in that conversation with Carlton and Sean earlier on, that there are 50 points available on the finish line. But it was neither Jakobsen nor Wout van Aert who won the other day. It was welcome back to Dylan Groenewegen of Bike Exchange.
Now we have the stage winner of Sunday, Dylan Groenewegen. Dylan, how was your travel, and could you enjoy that rest travel day with a victory in your pocket?
Yeah, the travel go really smooth. Of course, it was a little bit late in the evening, but we did a small celebration. But it was nice that we had yesterday a rest day and can celebrate it a little bit more with everyone. Yeah, it's still unbelievable, but really nice so early in the Tour de France.
At the same time, it's a big day in front of you and your team. Will you guys commit to the stage today or see how it goes? Or there's all those small little climbs that are out there?
I think it's possible to make it a bench sprint. Of course, we have to look at it in the race. But we are really motivated to do a good job and do it again today. And I think it's possible to survive for me. So let's fight. And it's a little bit harder than the other stages, but I think not hard enough. And yeah, let's give it a try.
If I look over your shoulder, there's Mats Pedersen of Trek Segafredo. He made your life very hard in Dauphiné. Are you scared of Trek Segafredo and the other teams to do something?
Of course, that's one of the...
Not just against you, against all sprinters.
Yeah, of course, that's one of the teams who can pull on the small climbs. But yeah, what can I do? I can only start really in the front on the climb, and then we will see what happens after. The shape is good, but we have to see it in a race and need a little bit luck.
Then all the best. Good luck.
Thank you.
Dylan Groenewegen there. The shape is obviously good. Let's introduce a man who saw that shape being good probably before any other of our commentators did, because you picked him the other day. Hello, Robbie McEwen.
Hello, Rob. Good afternoon. Yeah, I did pick him the other day. I was just optimistic because I just know the form that he's in, and he didn't quite get it right on the first bunch sprint on stage 2. But I'm aware of all the work that's been going on, and as I've said during the breakaway show to the guys, they already knew, but I thought I'd gloat a little bit about it after he won and admit once again that I've been doing some work with Dylan Groenewegen and the Bike Exchange team. But not only with Dylan, also with Caden Groves, their other sprinter, who's been having a really good season. But there's quite a large entourage of people who have been really concentrated on the sprint squad at the Bike Exchange Jayco team. As Dylan mentioned in his interview after his victory, it's also for him, it's been a really tough time over the last 18 months or so. We've spoken extensively about Fabio Jakobsen, his comeback from the physical injuries that he suffered. But one of the big thing with Dylan Groenewegen was the hidden injury, the mental scars and trauma that he's carried, not only from the incident itself, but everything that happened afterwards, with things as bad as death threats to him and his family in Holland, having to have police and security teams at his house, and it's been an extremely tough time for him, and it took him quite a long time to find his mojo back as a sprinter, to take the risks necessary, but also to establish himself back at the front of the peloton. It's been a real work in progress, and now, with that victory on stage 3 there in Denmark a couple of days ago, it seems like he's really back now. But I think the important part for him now is not resting on his laurels or having a moment of decompression after that win, but really being able to consolidate and push on again and just go for more. Get that hunger and the realisation that he is one of the absolute best in the peloton when it comes to the sprint, and he just is. And I was really pleased. I think it's a nice scenario to see Fabio win a stage, then Dylan, even though there's from one side still a bit of a war of words. But nice for cycling, good for the fans, great for Dylan, good all round.
Yeah, there's obviously going to be a bit of a war of words between the guys. That's natural, but when you talk about death threats and things like that, I'm afraid the cruelty and lack of sense in this world never ceases to amaze me sometimes. Anyway, let's get on with some good racing, because there's a look around here and there's 180 metres to go to the top of the Côte de Rémilly-Verquin. And again, it's Magnus Cort. This time there's going to be no contest. Another point to add to that competition. And it's going to be 8 points and counting now. Nobody else is on the board. 99 kilometres to go. It's climb 2 of 6 available today. It goes yet again to Magnus Cort Nielsen of EF Education Easy Post, the undisputed king of the mountains of this Tour de France so far.
Well, speaking of that, Rob, I'm not sure if you guys have already gone through this stat and a shake of hands. They've agreed to not kill each other out in the break, Anthony Perez and Magnus Cort. I was watching when they sprinted to the death on Kassel. I mean, on the cobbles there, they're really blowing each other up. But there's when we come back after this break, I'll tell you about a little stat I just discovered a little bit earlier in relation to the King of the Mountains competition.
Was this the stat that I just read out about 5 minutes ago?
Yeah, it could be. As I said, when you started talking, I stopped listening. Is it about the number of KOMs won in the first part of the Tour?
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you would have done it. Jeez. It's no wonder they call him the stat man.
I'll tell you what, though. I'll tell you what. We'll play a little game here, because those of you still listening are already fantastic customers of ours who are watching on our digital platforms. Let's pretend you didn't just have that conversation, and when the televiewers come back, you can go with the big build-up if you want, Robbie.
Well, Dan did it 5 minutes ago, and now they've just gone over a KOM. There's going to be an update to the stat, and I'm going to see if I can get in first with the latest update, the new numbers.
Oh, well, I've not seen a new update, I must admit. And by the way, they don't call me the stat man, they call me the stat thief. Not many come from me. I just see them on the internet from other people that spend a lot of time working on who was the last person to do this, that or the other. Occasionally I might come up with my own, but it's quite a rarity.
All right, well, let's make it a little bit more highbrow and call you the stat plagiarist.
I normally do give credit where it's due if I see a stat online, but yeah, in fact most of the time I'd say, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll give credit right here and say anyone who has any sort of social media account with stat in the name, I thank you.
Yes.
Well, we're into the final 100 kilometres of today's stage. I think this is the shortest so far, 174. Of course, on paper, as we've been building up throughout the day, if the wind had been playing ball, then it would have been one of the most difficult so far. We could have said that for any of the opening stages, and I'm sure this man would have wanted a little bit more chaos, wind and wild conditions up in his native land. He will have enjoyed things nonetheless, and in 4th place at 18 seconds. Cobbled stage coming up tomorrow. It's still not beyond the realms of possibility that Mads Pedersen could yet have a go for a little stint in the yellow jersey at this Tour de France. And I think there's a few riders with that thought in mind. I was reading a little bit of an interview with Mathieu van der Poel, who was going along those lines, saying, well, it's not a huge deficit that I have at the minute, and with any sort of attack tomorrow, I could well get it. And when asked why we haven't seen too much of him at the front so far, he said, well, I've just been warming the engine up. So sounds a little ominous, doesn't it, for anybody wanting to take on Mathieu van der Poel?
Well, it's ominous if he says he's just warming the engine up, and then you look at the quality of his opening time trial on day one, if his engine wasn't warm yet. I'm curious to see how he's going to tackle it. Yeah. I'm curious to see how he's going to tackle it today. I don't think that final climb is going to pose any problems for Jasper Philipsen either. But if if it really does go down on that climb and there's a big attack, I expect Mathieu van der Poel to at least track the moves. If we see an attempt a la Jumbo-Visma in stage 1 of Paris-Nice from this year, splitting the race to pieces.
Lotto Soudal start to take things up as we get somebody riding again, the first time in a while at the Tour de France. Welcome back to all of you television viewers. We're into the final 96 kilometres now. We've just had Magnus Cort go over and take, uncontested, his second mountain classification point of the day, which leads me to Robbie McEwen.
Well, I hope this is a new so. I think Dan would have mentioned it before that that Magnus Cort was the first man since Bahamontes in 1964 to take all of the first seven mountain points in a Tour de France. But now he's the solo record holder. He's taken the first 8.
Well, I will let you off then, Robbie, because that is an extra bit to what I said before.
So we can now say that Magnus Cort is a better climber than the Eagle of Toledo.
Probably differently categorised climbs, but it's not Magnus's fault. I mean, that's the biggest climbs they have in Denmark.
Hey, you can only beat what's put in front of you, can't you?
You can, or put behind you. You can only climb what's put in front of you. You can beat what you put behind you.
Well, here's
so it's not a new stat, it's just a enhanced stat, updated. It's probably as close as I'm going to get to getting one in front of Dan Lloyd. Because if there's stats on what he's got right over me or got him before me, I think he's leading about 57 to 1. Or is it more, Dan?
I haven't been keeping count of those stats, unfortunately.
No, you ran out of fingers and toes, didn't you? Bit of a breeze, but due to drop throughout the rest of the afternoon, according to the forecast. And as they come towards the finishing, Calais, it looks like they're going to pick up a cross tailwind before that final couple of corners. We go through a couple of roundabouts at 2.5 kilometres to go. 1.5 to go as a right-hand turn, and then a left-hand turn, 500 metres to go. But it doesn't seem like the wind's going to have much of a factor in how the race plays out this afternoon.
No, real disappointment, as Dan and I were saying. Both being a little geeky and sad on our rest day, I think, looking at the wind forecast and hoping that we were going to have something to really shout about today, but doesn't look the case. Here's a better image of this hillier terrain that we're heading into, however. You just see the rise there and start to appreciate it on that last shot. And this is the start of the hilly terrain that lasts really until we get to around 10 kilometres to go. Final climb today. Looking ahead to it, Robbie, as a sprinter yourself, as you see the peloton coming over, but no points left here. That final climb today, a bit of a preview. I'm sure you've had a look at it. As a sprinter yourself, would it have posed you, or is it going to pose any of the big, thick-leg sprinters any problems?
It shouldn't do, although we've talked about that stage 1 in Paris-Nice this year where Jumbo-Visma split it to pieces and 3 of them rode away. Went 1, 2, 3 with Laporte, Van Aert and Roglic. There's so much more depth in this field at the Tour de France. Any gaps that would have opened in, say, a Paris-Nice stage will be well filled in a Tour de France. There'll be a lot more riders capable of being in the front and up amongst it. It'll be a leg stinger, that is for certain, but it shouldn't be so much that it'll spit the sprinters out the back. I mean, they'd have to be having quite a bad moment. The race would have to be really on and punching over every single hill to really pose a big problem. It's not to say that it won't get strung out and some of the sprinters will have to work pretty hard to get back towards the front, but I don't think it's a race-splitting hill. I would have liked to imagine that if I was posed with a hill like that in the final 11, 12k of a stage, that I also would have got over it no problems. Anything bigger than a Cat 4 may have been a problem. But no, I see them all getting there today, but it just depends who gets there with the best legs.
Let's see then. For now, though, 93k's to go. I think it's Taco Tuesday, isn't it?
it's going to be chaos, and it's going to be a big theater, and it's going to be everything I think that everybody is telling me.
For a handful of riders each year, the quest for the yellow jersey's all-consuming, but for the majority on the smaller teams, just being there on the start line is the fulfilment of a long-held dream.
Yeah, it's my first Tour de France, so it's gonna be it's like a child dream, of course. So it's gonna be really special, and I'm really looking forward to it. Really excited to see and curious. Like it's gonna be such a special race. My goals individually, I want to try to go for a stage, to hunt for the stage and to go for the breakaway, and to in that way to try to win the stage would be, yeah. Of course, the chance is like nothing, almost nothing. So, but it was also last year in the Giro, but the chance was also almost nothing. So, and then it worked out pretty well.
200 metres to go for Taco van der Hoorn, and they might have just left it late. I think they have left it late. Taco van der Hoorn riding away. Taco van der Hoorn with one of these stories of the Giro d'Italia. Oh my word, even he can't believe it. Taco van der Hoorn, we didn't think that was happening. He's the winner. Stage 3 to Intermarché.
After the vision, I couldn't really believe. I had no words, and I think it was pretty obvious on my face, but I was just really surprised. So I already have planned in my head to which stages can be a good chance. But if you only keep saving energy for that day, I think it's a bit of a gamble. So you never know what's happening in that race. So I want to try it already from the beginning, I think.
All of us have our heroes, people who inspire us, but for Taco, it's a slightly left field choice.
When I was living in Holland, and we had a big poster with the friend I'm living with of Graham O'Brien, is our hero actually, because he was just by doing some things different, get so much out of his physical capability. I'm maybe not the biggest talent in cycling, but I just try with the engine I have to use it as best as possible. And it's nice that the cycling is still going about speed and not about power only. So yeah, that's something where he's a big example for me.
A nice story in Taco van der Hoorn, making his Tour de France debut, and I imagine Danny he's going to be attacking, but he'll pick his days in, I suppose, Thomas Again style fashion.
He will. I mean, he's not somebody that's going to be going up the road for publicity, which is not necessarily what Magnus Cort did, but he would also have been aware that when Magnus Cort went up the road on stage 2, it was very, very unlikely that Van der Hoorn was going to be able to outsprint him up the KOMs and the type of climbs that we've had in the opening few stages of this race. But Taco will definitely have a number of stages marked down in his own road book of these are the days for me, and he will go absolutely all out in the breakaways on those days. But he's very clever with it, as you well know, Rob, which is why he has the strike rate that he does. It doesn't always come off. It never does in the early breakaways. But when you look at his success ratio for the types of breaks and the types of days he goes in a breakaway and up the road, he does pull it off with reasonable regularity. And when I say that, it's once or twice a year. But for many riders that go up the road, it never happens ever in their career. So he's got the knack. He puts a lot into his position on the bike, his aerodynamics, etc., as he was just talking about in that interview there. So I think all of us would like to see Van der Hoorn going up the road and having similar success to what we saw him have at the Giro d'Italia just over a year ago.
Riders using the pavement there. Maybe have been made aware of that rather large fine for Quinn Simmons for doing just that in Denmark. I'm sure they'll keep an eye on that. And just going back to something I just saw at the back of the peloton again there, Robbie. I don't know if you've been keeping an eye on this, but I think Carlton alerted us to it right at the start of the stage. And I think between Carlton and you, Dan, you were probably keeping tab on the number of times that Wout van Aert went back, but I just saw him returning to the peloton yet again.
Yeah, I can't give you an answer on why that is. We can only speculate. But it is rare to see a guy like Wout van Aert go back to the team car so much. if it was something tactically, you could easily discuss that over the radio, unless he's having a radio problem.
One explanation.
The only other speculation is that he's not feeling well. Have we seen shots of a mechanic hanging out the car doing anything with the bike?
No, not yet, but I know that Bradley was going to keep an eye on that, so we might hear from Bradley a little later on if he's managing to see something, but we'll keep an eye on it. And, well, the man who's been counting, I think I'm going to bring him back in now because he's got an update. He's got a little tally chart going as Carlton.
I have. It's not something I take any delight in at all, Rob. 5 times he's been back to the car. And this last time, I don't know if you noticed how pale of pallor he was. He doesn't look right to me. I'm hoping and praying that for all of us that he is okay. And I know that there's been a lot of illness and some great precautions as well, Rob, haven't there been, from various teams, just to try and keep everybody safe. And in these times, we're all very, very aware of illness and indeed its impact. We need to keep our fingers crossed, don't we?
Certainly is. I wouldn't wish to speculate on any illness, but it is certainly strange to see him going back, as you say, if you've been counting the numbers there, and we'll keep it going, and that's probably a good enough period and moment for me to hand to you for the next little while.
Thanks, Rob. Rob will be back in a non-too-distant future. He'll be carrying us home today on what I'm hoping will be an absolute brute. I think we've been saying that for every single day so far. But, yeah, I mean, it's difficult to quantify, to be honest. Every single day we've had our expectations, and some of those expectations have been reached and others have not. A little bit of a bang on the hams here just to make sure that no cramp starts to set in. And with the amount of peaks and troughs that we've got today, I told you about this rolling plateau that characterises this part of the world, an area that many of you just go straight by on. Is it the N1, the main highway that just takes you into the centre of France and indeed onwards and beyond? Very little visited this part of the world either by French people, actually. More numerous seem to be the Dutch, the Germans, and of course the Brits, like my good self, who came to live here in a little town called Ré-sur-Audie on the River Audie. And in fact, we're nudging down towards that area, and this all looks very, very familiar to me. The sort of very few windows buildings with the very high roofs called the Longeur, which is a barn, essentially, that on one end the farmer would live, the beasts of the field during the winter would be brought in to live underneath, on the other 3/4 of the building, and above would be the grain that they would, there was no drying facilities back in the day, they'd actually sprinkle that in the roof, and the beasts, the warmth of the animals underneath during the winter would dry out the grain. So yeah, it's all very, very familiar to me. And indeed, the rolling terrain here, it has its own beauty. Big sky country, I think you might say. And the rivers that cut through it and head off towards towards Boulogne-sur-Mer and the rest of the coast there, the Touquet and the like, they cut great valleys. And in fact, I think the main 3 of them, of course, one being the Audie, one being the Somme. I can't remember. Is it the Saône, the other one? Yeah, it cuts through to the coast and creates these hills that we're dealing with at the moment, and you can see the way this building is cut into the hillside. This is not a categorised climb. Peter Sagan looks well up for it today, and I'm absolutely loving that. In fact, at the beginning of the day, I said to Sean, what about Sean Kelly? What about Peter Sagan, a man very much in his own image, of course, I think you might say, apart from the beard, obviously. And he said, yeah, absolutely, it could be his kind of day, and he's finding his form, which is exactly what we want. Robbie, a victory for Sagan would not only be good for Sagan, it'd be good for cycling.
It would be. I mean, I don't think there was anyone disappointed to see him back on the top step of the podium after 9 months of absence when he won a stage in the Tour de Suisse in mid-June. And I, for one, would be quite happy to see him win a stage in this Tour de France. He's been very consistent and racing at the front in the bunch sprints. He was pretty annoyed at Wout van Aert a couple of days ago on stage 3 that was won by Dylan Groenewegen. He thought Van Aert came across too much, and he was pretty animated in his gestures towards Van Aert, but when asked about it just 10 minutes or so later, he said no, everything's good. He'd calmed down. But he was none too impressed at the time. But I tell you what, with 86 kilometres to go and a 7-minute lead for these two, it is really time that the chase increases in intensity behind, maybe including some of Sagan's teammates.
Yeah, well, I think if he hadn't been balked yesterday, he made a bit of a meal of it, didn't he, with lots of pointing of gesturing towards Wout van Aert. I think he would have had a chance yesterday. So let's find out. We'll have an homage-ometer from John. I think the geometry of that bike needs to be dealt with. It's not a design I'm familiar with. Here comes Peter Sagan.
Peter, I can't say it, but you are back. But is it also, you haven't been away, but is it the same Peter Sagan as we have seen a few years ago, and who was not struggling, but just fighting to be there again? Are you happy with your form and how it went the last days?
Well, we still are just in the start of Tour de France. Then for now it's going well. We didn't crash and stuff. Then it's fine. And for sure, I would like to keep fighting.
Fighting
also
today?
For next days.
Yeah, that's 2 big days coming up for you and your team. Amit Tanios on your side, and the team is really performing well. So what's the goal for today, and what's the strategy going out there today? A bit of wind, hilly stage?
Yeah, definitely it's going to be an interesting stage today. And the thing is just to race in the front and to be ready for the decisive moment, I think, in the race. And just that. After we'll see what's going to happen in the final. But yeah, it's going to be interesting with wind.
You would prefer a hard race over the climbs? If nobody's really taking on, is it a chance Total Energy is making the race harder for the sprinters?
Always depends from timing and, the moment, how it's going. Then, yeah, today is going to be, you have to be ready any moment.
Then, all the best. Good luck.
Thank you.
Dan, you have to be ready at any moment. He's a man who, well, we've shared many a moment of admiration as we watched him, even from a youngster back in 2012 when he was in bullying mode during the Tirreno, I think it was, in the Giro d'Italia. Phenomenal athlete. He's been gone too long, really, mainly hobbled due to COVID of late, but he seems to have got his mojo back.
He does. I mean, I think we all question levels of motivation, really, because when you've been at the top for as long as Sagan, and let's face it, earning the money that Sagan has earned over the last pretty much decade, I would say now, there's always going to come to a point, I think, where just the motivational levels that you had when you were younger aren't quite there anymore. It would be great if he's found that again, and it does appear from what we've seen over the first few days of the race that he is back, not quite where he used to be, but certainly really motivated to take stage wins.
You know, that there was a few months there where he mentioned it on a number of occasions, and it also coincided with moments where his form maybe wasn't quite as good as it has been in the past, but he'd often referred to there being no respect anymore in the peloton, and he wasn't able to find his way through as easily. He found that he wasn't getting the respect he felt he deserved from young riders in their first or second year pro. Now that he's riding stronger again, he's better, he's been winning again, those words haven't crossed his lips anymore. He seems to be finding his way through much more easily. So I guess that I don't know, thought of not getting the respect coincides with him not riding well enough to find his way through as easily, and was relying a lot more on being let through towards the front of the peloton. But in any case, it's good to see him back up the front and at full power again.
It's funny, isn't it, hearing somebody that's still, in my mind's eye, I still think of the very young Peter Sagan, and hearing him coming out with a back in my day kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly. It's one of those things that riders tend to say when they are getting a bit long in the tooth, Carlton. They start to talk about, oh, back in my day there was respect. None of the young riders have got respect anymore. Say, oh, yeah, actually, he's in his 30s. Yeah, OK, fair enough. But, yeah, it can get to you at times, but he seems to be in a really good place at the moment, Peter Sagan.
Well, that's good to see. I remember him bullying Vincenzo Nibali, who was his own teammate, and saying, oh, sorry, I didn't realise the screaming on the radio was directed at me to go back and help him. Yes. And I remember Nibali saying, there's just no respect from youngsters these days, especially within your own team. Oh, dear.
I think that's the thing as well with the disparity of age, particularly now with so many first-year seniors turning professional, that you can have a teammate that's 19 years of age, should I say, and if you're Gilbert or Valverde, you're 40. It's a big difference in terms of life experience, let alone cycling experience. And when you're on the bus with them, you must be thinking, oh, it's like having my kid here along with me.
Yeah, you could just about be racing with your own kid. So,
yeah, exactly. I can just imagine them sort of looking at what they're watching on YouTube and thinking, that's just not funny. Have that with my own kid.
Or not even knowing what YouTube is.
Well, you saw that big shift about 12, 13 years ago when social media really did start to take over and pervade everybody's life, that the older riders were saying no one talks to anyone anymore on the bus nor in the hotel. They're sort of wandering around their own world and fixed to their screens, and it's only getting worse.
Mark Cavendish actually had a rule that whenever whenever they all sat down for dinner, no mobile phones. And, it's a perfectly acceptable and I think sensible thing to have, because that's valuable time. And to have any kind of distractions around the dinner table, I think these days, most people are on screens from whenever we get any views of it ourselves. Whenever we cross over with riders, they generally tend to be have their nose buried into the screen, like most of us, to be honest. I think the human race, we're gradually going to get shorter and shorter arms and bigger eyes, aren't we? That's what that's all about. It's part of the evolutionary process.
Yeah, going to start having postural problems, always having our head tilted down towards a screen. But anyway, heads are tilted down at the front of the peloton. 6.5 minutes with 82k to go. This sort of chase is actually going to be better for the likes of Peter Sagan, Wout van Aert, Mads Pedersen, and not to the advantage of the likes of Dylan Groenewegen and Fabio Jakobsen. Instead of being able to just cruise up all the little climbs that are coming along, and they're all sort of between 800 metres and 1.5k long, they're going to have to keep a pretty steady, strong tempo on all the climbs to make sure they peg this gap back. So, the pure sprinters, it's not what they would have been looking for. They would have preferred a sort of longer, more gradual chase where they can take it easy on the uphills. Well, now their hand has been forced with just over 80k to go.
And the other side of that is that you can quickly burn up your domestiques, because if you're having to go really hard on the climbs as well as on flat sections and descents in between those climbs, you can find that you're running out of riders to do the chasing. So whilst Magnus Cort and Perez up front will not yet be thinking about the possibility of a stage win, there's going to come a point where they think, two strong riders, have they judged things badly behind? Will they start to run out of domestics to actually do the chasing? So I don't think either of them went up the road with any intention or ambition really of taking a stage win, but they would have been surprised at the leash that they've been given today.
6 minutes and more. It's handsome. I don't know. Let's see. Happy birthday, Philippe Gilbert. They're busy singing to him through his earpiece, I'm certain of it, which probably explains the smile. Will he give himself something to celebrate on this, his birthday? No idea. It's also the birthday of Alexander Kristoff, although they're separated by 5 years. Philippe Gilbert turning 40 today, 35 for Alexander Kristoff. So in school terms, Gilbert is the prefect who has just kicked out Alexander Kristoff into the rain, because he's got every right to do so. He's got a badge which allows him to do that. He's also got caps of rainbows upon his sleeves and watching. You never know what might happen. You also don't know whether 6 minutes is going to start to get silly. And when does 6 minutes mean that the breakaway can actually make it home? I have no idea. Well, we were talking about what was going on 12 years ago, and it was about then that GCN started. And of course, now it's very much part of our cycling hearts, is it not? Those of you who have signed up for GCN Plus, it's been an absolute joy to have your company. And don't forget, if you'd like to watch your cycling uninterrupted, then there's no better place to go. Have a look at the app, have a cruise around. It's not just about live racing either. Some spectacular content there for you to enjoy. GCN is amazing.
We have 8 robots, and they're usually continuously printing metal. The software will calculate all the angular movements of the robot to steer the 3D printing process.
You can make incredibly complex shapes that you potentially couldn't create through any other method of manufacture.
We actually were able to print this bike in 1 day. And the second day we printed the frame. In the third day, you just put on the wheels and ride it home.
Are we about to see a seismic shift to a technique that could potentially create a high-performance bike frame at just the push of a button?
Shame they can't push the button to make us quicker, but I mean, personally speaking, not the machines.
You just got to get an e-bike, Carlton. You can push the button to make yourself go quicker.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, don't tell anybody. 5 minutes and 55.
Oh, so you got one?
No, I haven't.
I thought I was going to explain all your Strava records. Or you just been in the car?
No, somebody impersonating me. 5 minutes and 50. Actually, there was a gang in Taiwan that put up that adopted me as their avatar, and I was winning loads of stuff. Sadly, yeah, they took it down because they started hurling sort of abuse at me as well. They sort of had fanboy commentary around it, and it was basically come on you, and then add your own expletives.
Oh, imitation is the highest form of flattery, don't they say?
Inflation, I think, is what they've done. It was a very ungainly looking cyclist, but hey, I was loving it at the moment, but it's all gone. 5 minutes and 51. We've got a double puncher coming up, not puncture, a double punch to the solar plexus down, 2 categorized climbs, first of which comes in, about 5 kilometers time. They'll be taking it on, 2 in very quick succession, and in the road book, one of them is detailed as a category 3 in error. It is a category 4. But nonetheless, it's probably suggestive of some of the peaks we're dealing with, and ramps of 10 and 12% we have at the top of the first of them.
Yeah, I can give you the stats, which is that the first one, which peaks at 74.3 kilometres to go, so just over 5 kilometres time. 1.1 kilometres the distance in total, and 7.7% average gradient. But as Carlton's just pointed out, some steeper ramps contained within that. And it's very quickly onto the 4th categorised climb of 6 today, which is 1.3 kilometres at 6%. But it's the fact that they're back-to-back, which could potentially make them more difficult, both for these rides up front, but also more importantly for the main peloton behind. Just before we get into the thick of the action, though, there's a charity ride that I wanted to mention. It's not something I normally do because there are so many incredible charities that people raise money for whilst riding, but this one particularly pulled at my heartstrings. So there's a young chap called Rupert Brooke, who unfortunately just before lockdown, just before COVID, lost his father unexpectedly at the age of just 4. After that point, the Children's Bereavement Centre were really helpful for both Rupert and his mum Jess, in supporting them through a very difficult period where, of course, they couldn't really see other people because everybody was in lockdown. Rupert is now 7 years of age, and tomorrow he's setting out to do a 200-mile ride between between London and Paris, to raise money for that the Children's Bereavement Centre that helped him and his mum. So he's already raised an awful lot, close to £30,000, and I'm sure he'd love people to get him over the line. It's an incredible cause. He's the youngest person that anyone knows of that's attempted that ride, so at 7 years of age it'd be great if we could give him some support. So I will retweet it from my account at Daniel Lloyd1, DanielLoyd1, if you would like to support Rupert on his amazing ride.
Yes, I'm right in the heart of the peloton here at the moment. We're on the wrong side of the peloton for you to be able to get camera shots, but we are approaching that couple of climbs now, and you can feel the tension in the peloton here. Now we're just on some rollers, quite exposed up here, and the wind is blowing. You'll see the flags in a moment as we go past. Oh my God, someone's just touched my knee with their handlebars. But look at these flags here now, so you can see the wind. That's what's causing a bit of nervousness here. Bit of Effin and Jeff in there at the motorbike here. I don't care. They can get out of the way. We've got a bit of priority here. We've got to bring these images to you. You can see everyone's trying to move up now because that wind is coming from the right here, and they're putting it over there now. So this is causing a bit of nervousness now. This is what it's going to be like now to the end of the stage. The wind is coming from the right. It's up. We're up on a bit of a plateau here, and it's quite exposed. And we're about 10k from these 2 climbs now. So we're getting into the business end of the race now. And you can see now everyone's starting to panic. We've gone through the feed, and they all want to be in that front now, starting to form their little formations of teams now. Everyone's riding together, so expect a lot to happen from here on in. And with that, I will hand you back to the commentary team.
Thanks, Pat. We have taken a turn, as you have seen, probably for the worst for Gilbert, who just got himself slightly cross-country, dipped off the side of the road. I think he got himself a puncture. Looks like he sorted himself out. I was worried he'd actually taken a tumble. But you see the sort of pace that is engaged with that at the moment. The wind's not helping because as a northwesterly, moving back down towards a westerly, which means it strengthens. When a northwesterly moves down towards a southwesterly, it does get stronger in the northern hemisphere. That's what a sou'wester is, a bad weather cape indeed. Well, this man, it's not exactly raining on his parade at the moment. He's getting himself back in, but you can see we've got no shadows, which means we've got clouds, and we've got some not rain today, but certainly some wind, of which there are plenty around here, which is why sand yachting and windsurfing is so massive on the coast around here. And you can see the flags, the attitudes they have towards their staffs. And this man working his way through the cars, and as yet has not been called for it. He's just holding legally to one side, just dipping in. He's working his way through 76.5 kilometres from home, which means in 2K's time we take the first of our peaks. These are those little dips that I was telling you about that characterise the terrain here. There's not that much flat to deal with, and in fact we've got two peaks coming very, very quickly together around the little town of Colombie. And here we go. Double kicker, Robbie, and these guys have got a lead of 5 minutes 11, but that's tumbled by a minute in probably the last 4K, so the chase is on again.
Yep, well, it's that intensity in the peloton, not just the chase, but also knowing that they're coming to a short descent. They're up on that plateau where the wind was getting a little bit of fetch. But these two riders are at the bottom of the climb now, but the peloton about to hit that short descent, and they all want to be in position and get themselves at the front and safe to then take on these two short, sharp climbs that are coming up. So whenever you've got something that causes a bit of anxiety in the peloton, and in positioning is important, the pace goes up and the gap to the leaders comes down. So in a way, it's very good for the teams that are leading the chase for their sprinters, just that the general pace of the race with that fight for position, driving the pace on and helping to reduce the gap.
Dan, as soon as we dealt with these two climbs, they'll be over very, very quickly. Very short time after that, about 6 kilometres later, we take a sharp turn into what will essentially be a block headwind. I'm just wondering what impact that's going to have. That'll turn into a crosswind when we get to the coast. We'll be racing for the coast. It could be an absolute nightmare. I'm kind of hoping it will be.
Always just depends on the strength of the wind. We can go on the forecast that we talked about earlier, which suggested it's going to die down from what was not a particularly high wind speed anyway for the first part of today's stage. So, I mean, either way, even if it's headwind, that's going to make sure that the bunch stays together until we get to the coast. But we're not expecting too much once we hit there in terms of the wind affecting the race. It's more the undulations that they're facing today, which, as you can see on your screen now, are far more severe than what we saw in Denmark on the opening couple of road stages of this race. So I am expecting fireworks, not coming from the wind direction or the severity of the wind, but more in terms of how they're going to have to ride behind and how the teams want to ride behind for their own tactics and their own plan for the day.
Yeah, I think, Dan, it's really going to be that battle for position coming into that final climb of the day, which tops out at 10.8 kilometres to go. So it's about 12 kilometres from the finish when they start it. So it's going to be somewhat similar to the preparation for a bunch sprint, just to get to the bottom of that climb, not get caught out if it does in fact split, if a team is strong enough to split it over the top and put the likes of Groenewegen and Jakobsen in trouble and try and burn them off.
75 kilometres to go. In about 10K's time, we'll be rejoined by Sean Kelly, who'll be with you until the end of today's proceedings. And the way we are proceeding, I've just counted actually, there are 9 significant climbs before now and the finish in Calais. You can probably factor in another 6 climbs as well to add to that list. But only 4 left are categorised, and we're coming to the Nel Blequin right now, which is the third climb of the day, so breaking the halfway mark as far as the peaks that are actually categorised. Very, very steep at the top. You may well have just witnessed a little peak that they've been over. That's just a mere introduction. And look at the pace. It's clearly up, 4 minutes and 38. It wasn't that long ago, it was 6 minutes. And look who is getting lively, extraordinarily lively today. Have been Total Energies. Dana, I haven't really noticed them not being on the front.
No, and it's been his two trusty lieutenants that have been with him at the front at all times so far. The second one in line being Danielos, and the one at the front, Bodnar, the Polish rider and time trial specialist. So he's been with them for many, many years. And when Sagan goes to another team, they often follow with him. And that's exactly what they've done, moving over to Total Energy. So they clearly just want to make sure that they're safe and sound at the front of the peloton. They haven't been doing any of the actual chasing. That's been left so far mainly to Lotto Soudal. Quick-Step haven't done much either since that initial skirmish at the very beginning of the race. So it looks like it is being left to the teams that have got a sprinter, but one that they know can climb, and the ones that they're looking to drop are just taking a back seat and saving all of their energy and all of their ammunition to make sure they can get them over the climbs.
I'm just wondering if things are going to calm down after you have this double puncture. I don't think so. I think we'll go over this. We have quite a significant or sharp descent that will introduce us to the next climb. But the next climb, once we're dealt with that, we'll go to another peak that you think, my goodness, why isn't this categorised? Because it really should be. Next up will be the Côte d'Arlet. And still, Mr. Maximum, Robbie, wearing the tash, Magnus Cort.
Yep, Magnus Maximus. Winning every climb so far in this Tour de France. Not more than Category 4s, but nonetheless, he's got every single one of them. He's wearing that Whoop band on his wrist that we've been bringing some data from, and some stats from his recovery rates and how hard he's pushing himself every day. I think even without that, we can see that he's pushing himself pretty hard every day because he's been in the break every single day.
It is
hence
lovely.
why he's won all of the climbs. But I think we are going to see it settling down a little bit in the peloton. Now they've got their positions at the bottom of that descent. They're about to start the first of those couple of sharp climbs. But it would be in the interest of the sprinters like Mads Pedersen to put his team on the front to keep the pace up, and exactly what Trek Segafredo are now doing. So they're making sure that it's not an easy ride for guys like Groenewegen and Fabio Jakobsen. Their team's absent from the front in the chase, saving all their energy and concentrating on getting over that final climb of the day, regrouping, getting their sprinters back to the front. They do not want it to be a hard ride over these climbs, but Trek Segafredo, they know exactly that. They need to spice it up. They need to burn the legs of those pure sprinters, and with 73 kilometres to go, they're taking the bull by the horns, and they're doing it.
As you said, there has to be some slippage for Groenewegen to actually succeed today, so he's going to want to save something. Get himself up to the front before that final climb at the Cap de Blanc-Nez, just above the Cap de Nez-Gris, incidentally. So the grey nose gives way to the white nose. I don't ask, I have no idea. Apparently it's something to do with the colour of the water. Meanwhile, Trek and Alpecin have decided that they're going to do some work, and look at Caleb Ewan's boys. They really mean business. Caleb clearly on a good day, Robbie.
Yeah, on a good day, and this is terrain that really suits him. He's actually very good over the short, punchy climbs. I mean, think of his rides that he's done in Milan-San Remo over the last few years. He's been second there, so he can really digest climbs like this quite easily, ride himself really quite near the front, even when the action's happening, and they're pushing on really hard. You see right now, Caleb Ewan's in about 6th, 7th wheel there behind his teammates. So no problem for him that the pressure's being applied. We're Trek at one end of the field, and here at the back, Quinn Simmons just gone back for a bidon, trying to bring that forward. But definitely they're really trying to apply pressure. Look at the gap come down to 3:46 now, and they know this is the sort of effort required to damage the pure sprinters.
Caleb Cullen needs it today, doesn't he, after two disappointing stages into Nürburgring and Zonderberg, for various reasons. Just getting squeezed out of it. Doesn't want to be in that kind of position again, I guess you might say.
Again. He's had so much bad luck already in this race.
Just constant down. What's going on?
Not sure whether that was another puncture again. I mean, if it is, you might be able to look at the tyres that he's using. I mean, it might not be that, just speculation, but there's a risk reward, isn't there? There's the lower rolling resistance tyres that allow you to cruise along at slightly less power than you would normally have to use with a standard tyre, but with that often comes risk of puncture. But he seems to have more than most so far, Alexander Vlasov of Bora Hansgrohe.
Just having a nice close look at the peloton coming over when he had that heli shot. We see Caleb Ewan there, just obscure by his teammates, but riding right at the front. But in front of midway in the peloton, I spotted Dylan Groenewegen, so far so good for the Dutchman. If he was struggling, he'd already be drifting down towards the back. So That's a pretty good sign for him so far, but certainly not the end of the pressure that's going to be applied by the team of Mads Pedersen.
Look at the time. Half a devil. 3:33, and I guess the day could be described as satanic by the end of it. Depends on how they ride it. Doesn't matter how big the peaks are, they can feel like an alpine test. And look at this, exactly. Having to work, Dan.
Yeah, he must have had some sort of problem as well, because it's his team that's working on the front. And Giulio Ciccone, no less, who's a very, very good climber, King of the Mountains winner at the Giro d'Italia a few years ago. When he goes hard in the front, you know that the other riders around him are going to start to suffer on the gradients that they're facing today, albeit on much shorter climbs than he's really suited to. So Pedersen must have had some sort of problem there, and not an ideal time. You know, 70 kilometres still to go, but keep mentioning these back-to-back climbs and the undulating roads. It's going to be harder for him to get back on now than it would have been had that puncture or whatever the problem was occurred about 50 kilometres ago.
It is a beautiful landscape, a lot of it very much shrouded, and some of you will be thinking about Cornwall and that kind of thing, where they bank up the drainage ditches here, and so you get these walls, and of course the very common trees here, which apparently were planted by Napoleon I in order to protect the troops and offer them up some shade as they were moved around the nation. Well, that was Napoleon, but I don't know. Will it get blown apart today? Sorry about that. There is a little bit of a tailwind as we cross this road. Jinks and dives all over the place. And we've got another climb coming to us almost immediately. This will peak out if we get back to our leaders very, very soon. It's called the Arlette. It's kind of flat at the top, not quite as sterling as the one that we've just dealt with, but it has a more focused downhill than we've just seen. And then it comes. Oh, dear Lord. Oh, Dan.
He's not too happy about the pacing effort here, Mads Pedersen. Bit of yelling and screaming, and okay, it was close-ish, but it looks closer on TV than it would have for Mads Pedersen.
I mean, he had it very much under control there. He knew that the cars 2 or 3 in front were braking, and that therefore his team car would have to brake very suddenly. There's a lot of trust between rider and driver in that situation, but well-earned trust, because often the person driving the car is an ex-bike rider. They know the score. It was more that the Trek car moved over to the right off the road, but then seemed to come slightly back onto the road at the last minute, and almost the wing mirror took Pedersen out there.
Yeah, he was just readjusting himself. He'd gone off onto the rough stuff on the right and then thought better of it, but had forgotten about the rider, Robbie.
Yeah, well, you could see Mads Pedersen also made that little adjustment, just shifted his bum on the saddle a little bit, just leaned it just to make sure he had that few centimetres up his sleeve to get around the front bumper. But, I mean, they're the sort of things we see on the screen, and we often go, ooh and ah. And the rider, if you ask them about it later, they'd say, what bit? I didn't feel anything. I didn't realise anything was going on.
I think it's often only when a former pro rider becomes a sports director that they realise how much responsibility there is in trying to tow a rider back on. You hear the likes of Matt Hayman saying the levels of concentration
Chance of this breakaway, having some fun today, probably narrowing with a gap of just 3 minutes and 20. Another climb to come. We'll be peaking out in about 300 metres time. I'm expecting Magnus Cort to come through and just snaffle this point again. It is a single one, despite the fact the road book is declaring it as a category 3. I don't think that's the case, but I believe it's a Cat 4 today, despite the fact it's I think it's just
it's a Cat 4.
Yeah, it's Cat 4.
Good. Okay. Well, at least we're certain. Oh, the fans! Look at them. They were great in Denmark. Of course, it was something unique for them, I guess, to have the tour. But it's a very strong showing as well here today, guys.
It is. I mean, fantastic crowds. Now the race has reached the homeland, not quite to the levels that we saw in Denmark, and the pure excitement of the population there. Here are a few words being, well, whispered, shouted into the ear of Jansje Reiner van Rensburg from Alan Davis as he gets a new front wheel in.
Not a lot of urgency here, is there?
No, it's they're taking their time. Alan Davis just priming himself for a good push off.
Massi Adamo's got a new job by the looks of things.
I mean, that's a joke that only you and I understand, pretty much, Carlton.
I threw it out there just so you could explain. One of our favourite editors, quite frankly. Lovely guy. It looked like him from the back after a very good Giro. Meanwhile, here we are to the peak. And yes, there is a proper accord here between these pair. And I guess if they are going to share some spoils a little bit later on, with the possibility that they might be able to push on, is there going to be any kidology today? Do you think they may well ease up and then suddenly go on the attack, which breakaways are given to doing on occasion?
I don't think so. I mean, at this point, the chase is really on, and it's partly about getting these two back, but it's also about making sure you're in position with your team, and also for some of the teams hurting the legs of some of the bigger sprinters and the more pure sprinters in this race. So I think whatever they did out front, if they slowed down, the bunch behind wouldn't slow down, which is not always the case. There are stages where the bunch will just go at the same pace as the leading group until they feel they need to pull them back into the fold. But I think at this point, Perez and Magnus Cort, they'll just be going pretty much as hard as they can from here to the finish, in the vain hope, I think, now of trying to still be out front once they get to the finish line.
I was starting to wonder if Magnus Cort might sort of not try and push too hard anymore and start to think a little bit tomorrow about the stage on the cobbles, which is something, you know, pre-race we would have backed him to do a really good ride in that stage, but he's been just so aggressive in his riding and being off the front every day on these sprint stages that you'd imagine he won't have enough of what's required for tomorrow's stage left in the tank. But I thought he may back it off after 3 or 4 climbs today. The jersey's completely safe, and it's a given they're going to get caught. I'm surprised if he goes 100% to stay out front as long as he possibly can.
It's busy out there. It's busy in here as well. We have Sean Kelly rejoining us. Dan, we're going to be hearing more from you post-race.
You will be. I'm off to get a very late lunch in the meantime. But yeah, enjoy the final part of the stage. I'll be watching, and I'll see you on the breakaway afterwards.
Did hear your tummy rumbling. Enjoy. Bon appetit. Meanwhile, Sean, it's getting lively. Today there seems to be very little flat. If you looked at the parkour, it's declared as a sprinter's stage. It's been very, very peaky. Let's put it that way, and there's a whole sequence of climbs still to be had, of which we will have just 2 categorised remaining.
Yes, well, that's true. We have the categorised climbs, and then, as you said, Carlton, a bit earlier, the non-categorised climbs. There's a lot of them as well. And we can see here it's still Ciccone who is pushing on the pace, and I think there's a plan there. They want to make it difficult for the real fast sprinters, and, you know, Pedersen is one can get over this lumpier stuff, so you can see the breakaway out front is coming down rapidly. And yeah, it's been a difficult day for the 2 men, and it was always going to be a real difficult task for a small breakaway of 2 to have any chance of staying away. But it did look a little bit hopeful earlier on. The gap was growing.
Well, we were criticising them a little bit earlier for what we thought was not offering up the best of supports in terms of doing their job of keeping the break honest. But Alpecin de Koenig have woken up to the task. Robbie, were they listening to us?
Yes, probably, Carlton. I think they were directly tuned into what we were saying. But you know, these are the teams that were to be expected, because with Mathieu van der Poel and Jasper Philipsen, and you know, we've already seen on these flatter sprint stages, the ones that are nailed on bunch sprint, they've been riding time after time for Jasper Philipsen. Mathieu van der Poel biding his time for a stage really suited to his capabilities. Possibly tomorrow, definitely on the way to Longwy with an uphill finish. I think that's one he can truly win and go head-to-head with Wout van Aert. But today for Philipsen, he won't struggle with that final climb, that Cat 4 climb that tops out with 10.8 kilometres to go. And I think it's also, like Mads Pedersen, like Caleb Ewan, to their advantage to make it a little bit harder for the likes of Groenewegen and Jakobsen. I still think they'll get over it, but they've just got to make them hurt as much as possible. And, you know, tactically, they're doing the right thing, and they're doing it on time. They're not just waiting to that final climb and try and blast it from there. They're throwing out a few jabs early on. They're trying to soften them up and then hit them with a big blow with 11k to go.
65 kilometres just about from home. Calling for some sustenance. I think it's possibly time for us to call for a little bit from John Harris-Bass, who, of course, is famed for his recipes of the day. And today, apparently, it's not eel flottante, which has really upset me from this part of the world, to be honest.
I know it's really upset you, Carlton, but
one of the finest desserts on planet Earth.
What we established earlier when we were chatting in the office was that this was going to be the first disagreement we had on this tour. It's quite early for us to have a falling out. We haven't got anywhere near Cahors. We are not anywhere near the Beaujolais region. And yet here we are with you singing all of the positives about what is quite frankly one of the most revolting desserts known to mankind. And it's just it's effortless. It's just
what you were going to say there.
I just think it's what did you think I was going to go full Brad Wiggins? It was almost as though someone just ran out of ideas in a French restaurant and decided to cobble together what they had left over. They had some egg whites. They'd make something that would just float on a little bit of spirit and some. I just dribble.
Let me just tell everybody, it is caramelised meringues floating as little islands upon what can only be described as thin custard. The magic of the pair of them, especially with a little bit of drizzled Calvados, is something very special to this area and close to my heart. But John is not keen.
Close to your heart arteries, I think it'd be, Carlton, with all that creme anglaise. But I'm with you. I could drink just a cup of creme anglaise for dessert. In fact, I could drink it for entree, main and dessert.
There you go. Beat that, John.
Well, I'm delighted, and I hope that you two enjoy your dinner together. Is all I can say, because you can happily. I mean, I suppose it's. I just have an aversion to any form of milk pudding, and custard comes into that. It comes under that umbrella, and that's all just because of terrible experiences from when I was between the ages of 7 to 13 with school food, and I probably should now in my mid-40s give it another crack, but I'm not going to today. That's the bottom line on this one, and maybe I will try eel flottante again at some point, but it's not what I've done today, because it wasn't a meal that I thought would be an easy sell to my children, who have decided that this year, they announced last night, that they're going to grade every single one of the dishes that I cook for this year's Tour de France. So immediately they were in on what I made last night, which was some petit farci du Nord. Now, farci is something that's made right the way through France, down in Provence. It will be very much more tomatoey based, but up in the north they make it because it's just an easy way of using up, if you've got some pork mince or some beef mince that you want to use up, and you want to use it up with some veg. You just want to stuff it into the veg. So it's a very basic idea. For this one, I was using beef mince and a few lardons, some onion, garlic, bit of white bread that you grate up as well, an egg to make it all mixed together with some dried herbs and some salt and pepper, and then you just mélange this all together, and then you put it and stuff it inside aubergines, peppers, courgettes as well, and I even tried an onion last night. I didn't eat that myself, that was my eldest son, he did, and he just went on presentation. He said with the first mouthful being with the eye, he gave it a 2 out of 5, but on taste he was very pleasantly surprised to discover that it was actually more like a 4.5 out of 5. So I was pretty happy with that, and that is the sort of level that I'm going to try and maintain throughout the rest of the tour. So you can find this recipe on my Instagram page, which is at JHB Foodie Cyclist, or you can go to the fanculamedia.wordpress.com website, which is where all of the recipes will be throughout this tour as well. And that's the first recipe for this year. I'll be working my way through the regions as we navigate La Grande Boucle.
Fantastic, thanks, John. By the way, Sean, thumbs up for eel flottante?
Yes.
There you go.
I will join the team.
Thank you, mate. We'll have more from John and his cookbook tomorrow. What we got? Again, more problems.
Yes, well, he looked like that. He just ran out of road there in the corner and lost contact with the peloton, and he's just trying to get back in the cars. But we can see here, this is starting to test some of the riders here on the rear end of the peloton. These little hills, they're being pushed on in the front of the peloton. Ciccone is still really, keeping the pace really high. And the riders, we can see Pogacar, we can see Majka, some of those guys who are, great climbers. They're chatting on the front, but on the rear of the peloton, there's a lot of riders, starting to feel the pressure coming on here, and we can see the way it's lined out. And as you said, Carlton, earlier in the day, there's a lot of climbs that are not categorised at all here, and they're starting to be felt by a lot of the riders on the rear end of the peloton.
I am starting, Robbie, to believe less and less in the sprinters because of the terrain.
I'm still believing in the sprinters. I think they're still going to get there, but I can't fault the way the other teams are going about it. They're trying their best to fatigue them and do what they can to take a kilometre an hour or so off their top-end speed. I just don't think the course is hard enough in combination with the little bit of wind that there is, which is forecast to drop throughout the afternoon. In fact, as they come along the coastline, they'll get a bit of crosswind, which will then turn to a tail crosswind, which is definitely advantageous for those who are good enough to go on the attack on that final climb. But I still think the sprinters will make it. They'll be desperate to get over, and the battle for position will be really interesting coming into that final climb. It'll be like we're coming into the final kilometre for the sprint as they approach that hill, because they know they need to start at the front. The likes of Groenewegen, Jakobsen, they really need to be in the first 10 or 15 as they hit that climb to make sure they're not going to miss a split.
Just a moment for the camera work here. Absolutely spectacular. Some of these tracking shots are superb from the helicopter. The West Cam operators, of course, are all feeding pictures back to you via Euromedia. And they do a spectacular job on behalf of the Tour de France. It's beautifully framed almost constantly. And they find shots that you will not see in any other sport, really, and I love them for it. I always think that we don't give enough credit to those who are bringing you the pictures and working so hard to make sure that all this is nailed together. Our arena, of course, is an entire country, or indeed more than one, as we have witnessed so far. In fact, we're visiting Belgium, as you know. We'll be visiting Switzerland as well after 3 days in Denmark, and we thank the Danes for a wonderful opening to this year's race. But the 109th, yet again, it is our friends at Euromedia who are doing a job via, of course, the organisers at ASO, and it's all credit to them. Gorgeous pictures, and 60.8 kilometres to go, and the gap is down now to just over 2 minutes. Break doomed, surely. We'll be hearing from Florian Sénéchal in a short while. Surely it looks like a task, the first task of the day has kind of been achieved. They've dealt with much of the day. They've dealt with the wind. It seems to be easing. And just looking at the demeanour of the riders at the moment, they look reasonably happy with themselves for the time being.
Well, some are very happy, but I think there's others that are starting to feel a little bit. But I think it's been, in general, a good day for everybody. The wind conditions, not real causing problems, and they're getting through the day. And it's all about now staying safe and getting through the final for a lot of the riders. Other ones are thinking of the stage here with their team, and this is going to be an exciting final. And the big advantage the two breakaway had, it looked like there might be a one where they could go much further, but when the peloton just piles on the pressure, it just melts down so quickly.
Philippe Gilbert back in. We're going to be hearing from Sénéchal.
Florian, ça y est, on y est, 4e étape en France.
Well, Florian, the fourth stage, first in France, at home with the national jersey. Well, it's a great pleasure to come to Dunkirk with nice weather. It's maybe the first time I've come to Dunkirk with such good weather. I'm happy to be here. Lots of emotion today. Every day I want to just jump on the bike and show off this jersey. It's very satisfying. Wearing this jersey in France, I didn't think there would be so many supporters today, but there's loads of noise, and for me that's great. It's a very windy stage, difficult. You know the route very well, though. What do you think about this stage, and how do you think it's going to play out? It's a nice stage. Yeah, it's windy, but actually not as windy as it could be. We'll see how the peloton rides the last climbs, because for sure it's going to be very fast and very nervous there. There'll probably be some crashes. I don't think it's hard enough to make splits, though. If there aren't any sprinters up there, do you reckon you could get involved? We'll see on the last climb just how it goes.
Great to see the the Tricolor. We nearly did not have it, actually. He was a late replacement for Tractor Tim de Klerk, who does a lot of driving on behalf of that team. And so I think good to have. I mean, what a super sub, Sean, for a team which had a lot of scrutiny about its roster, not least because of Mark Cavendish.
Yes, and of course Alaphilippe, not making it either because of the crash from Liège. We did see him at the French Championships. He was very active, but I don't think he was at the level that the team would like him to be, or maybe Alaphilippe himself. But for the French champion to be able to ride with your jersey in the Tour of France, like that is so important, and for Sénéchal to be here, as he said, to ride the race for 3 weeks and being the national champion, it's just a great feeling. And yeah, today is a day where in the final he's a rider that can get over those sorts of lumpy terrain. Will it be that situation where we might see some of the sprinters that we will see in the next 57.8 kilometres?
It's lovely to watch the conversations going on between riders, and of course this is a cabal, a band of brothers really that travel the world, and lots of riders have of course drifted between teams, and you're never that far away, Robbie McEwen, from a friend, are you, within the peloton?
No, you're never too far from a friend, but you're also never too far from your frenemy. Yeah, guys who you know well, may have been teammates with, get on along well with, but you're going to race each other for the victory at the end of the day. You'll often see rivals chatting to each other in early part of the stage, but when it comes towards the end, there are no friends.
Indeed. Well, let's see how this one pans out. A lot of hard work has been done throughout the day, possibly a little bit more than some teams were thinking, and it was Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl that really kicked the hornet's nest earlier on today and livened things up. Interesting for me is to see which teams are actually hiding themselves out there. Team Bike Exchange have done a superb job so far of keeping themselves quiet.
Carlton and Sean, that early attack by Quick-Step, we've gone through why they wouldn't be riding at the moment. They're trying to just not push the pace too hard. They know they're going to catch the break. It's less than 2 minutes. They don't really need to contribute. It's the other teams trying to make it hard to tire out. Fabio Jakobsen and Dylan Groenewegen as well. So same goes for Bike Exchange as Quick-Step. But I'm not so sure that was an orchestrated team attack coming off Castle early on that downhill by Quick-Step, because they were missing riders all over the place. They had Mika Murku in the second or third group on the road, along with another 2 teammates. It was really quite strange to see that they went at that moment. It was Catania who pushed the pace, and I'm not convinced it was a team order for him to do that. I think he just had a rush of blood.
What do you think, Sean?
Well, that was exactly, we were asking why was he doing it, considering like there was 2 teammates, very at the rear end of the peloton, and actually got caught out in that split, and had a bit of a right to get back in. You'd wonder why they were doing it, and as I said, I didn't understand the tactic. I still don't know why they were doing it. Maybe they were expecting the wind to be in a better direction, meaning a side wind when you get off the climb of the Cassel, and that would push on from there. But it was a funny one, and difficult to understand why they were doing it at that point in the race, considering the wind wasn't really blowing that strong anyway.
Indeed. It is a team that has been under the spotlight, of course, not least because of the pre-race selections. Things going very well for them, of course, with a win for Jakobsen on the back of Lampert's win in the time trial. So the balance is there, it seems. And another issue late on. 55 kilometres still remaining, of course, but nonetheless, whenever you've got these peaks, we're approaching a next climb, this is not the sort of thing that you want. This terrain makes it uncomfortable to get back in. We've seen Philippe Gilbert have to get back in twice, Robbie, and it's not something you want. You need all your energy for the end of the day, not intermediate.
Yeah, well, you do. But Kamil Gradek, he's there to look after the likes of Jack Hagan, Damiano Caruso in the Bahrain team. And you see there's no panic in the way he's riding. He's just waiting for the vehicles to come back past him and just slot his way into the slipstream, much like we saw Vlasov do, Mads Pedersen. We have seen a lot of punctures today. Compared to the first few days in Denmark, there's a lot more flat tyres going through this region. So that's something we also will maybe need to pay attention to and expect in the run-in through the final kilometres. Of course, as you get closer to the line, it becomes more critical to have a fast change and have teammates on hand. So with the number of punctures we've seen, it's definitely looking risky for the final part of this stage. So just another spanner in the works, possibly, for a number of teams.
The roads here, country roads, C and D roads, I think you might describe them. Some of them look a little bit worn down, and the way that they repair the roads out here, because they're not heavily used, the ones that we're playing with today, they basically lay liquid tar and then they sprinkle it with gravel. And you often see those little beware gravel signs knocking around. And as some of the gravel gets knocked away, it finds itself beseated at the side of the road. And so if you do try and move up, and we've seen a few rides, there's not much space out there, just nudging over towards the edge. That's where you're going to find some of those sharper stones that were the first to be knocked off by the cars when they relayed the road, and they kind of live there forever until the road is relayed again.
Yeah, it's sort of those flints, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's the type of stone they use to crush, and it becomes very sharp little shards that could go straight through the tyre. I'd be interested to know how many teams are actually riding with tubeless. As we heard from the opening time trial, Philippe Organa, he punctured, but riding on tubeless, it sealed itself. He lost a few pounds of pressure in the tyre, but was able to continue on. And he said it's not something I can blame my defeat on. But
that was magnanimous of him, wasn't it? Just to say, look.
Yeah. Parker, well done, mate. He went down there to climb all three sides.
Good Lord.
In 40-degree heat. So, Chris, well done. You're a nut.
Slightly more benign here. I think you'd have to be, especially at 40 degrees.
40 degrees, mate. It's enough to make a budgie fall off his perch.
Certainly is.
Especially if it has to climb the Mont Ventoux.
Yeah, and we're on here. Is that, it's still pronounced Ventoux? We'll ask Rob when he comes back. I'm sure it is. Côte de Ventoux.
It could be one of those strange local dialect setups where you have to pronounce the S, yeah. The Ventoux.
Yes, possibly. Let's hope so, to avoid confusion. Well, if that was the Bald Mountain, I'm a banana. 53.5 kilometres. It was. We're not on the Ventoux just yet.
But you changed your surname to Cavendish.
We should be. Yes, of course. The famed banana. You and your knowledge, John. We're at the l'Abbaye de Notre-Dame de Leek, with two big eyes painted on the side. Don't know if you got anything on that.
It's a very beautiful church here in Leek. It's a collegiate church founded in 1131 by Robert, also known as the Bearded Robert, not to be confused with many other Roberts who returned from crusades, but he came back from a crusade and built this abbey here, and then it was turned over to Protestantism. No, not at all. That is a complete mispronunciation of a word that I should have known slightly better through my theological degree. Pre-Monasterinian, I still can't say it. It's basically, it was a pre-monastery, is what they're trying to say in 1131. So it went on to become a monastery, then reverted to becoming a church. So that's why it's got the abbey part built out the back of it.
In these parts, just look up the Abbaye de la Jardin on the Odie River in the Odie Valley. It's absolutely beautiful, and it is kept as a children's home. It's actually a home for distressed children. Despite what you may think or believe, it's the calmest and most beautiful place that you can possibly imagine, and the children there are beautifully looked after, and you can stay there, and it is absolutely wonderful. They've got the most spectacular gardens, as you'd expect. It's just one of those little secret places that not many people know about, which is no longer a secret because I've just mentioned it. But the Abbaye de la Jardin in the Odie Valley, have a look at it and try and go and stay there. It is just absolutely beautiful. It's like a little bit of heaven. And of course, for those poor young souls that find themselves being looked after there, as well as the guests, of course, such as myself who stay there a few times. Yeah, it offers a bit of tranquility, and it's just, in this part of the world, it is a very peaceful place. That's not going to be the case at the end of today, because I think it's going to get turned into a proper brutal day. A little bit of a turn here, and we will be taking on this next climb in about 5 kilometres time. We've had no flat, Sean, for about the last, well, for much of the day, to be honest.
No, well, in the past kilometres, it's definitely got much more undulating, and we've seen a lot of climbs there which are not categorised for the mountain classification. And yeah, the peloton, we can see there it's being pushed on, so they're trying to test the sprinters out, put them under a bit of pressure on any of those uphill sections, and that's what you're going to do if you keep the pace right high. But will it be enough that they put them in difficulty on the final climb of the day? I think that's where we will see the real fireworks going, and it will be not just on the climb, but before the climb there will be a big battle to get in there in a real good position, and then we will see, will the peloton split, and will there be some of the sprinters that not make it? And yeah, it's a day where it's a slow burner again, with the wind conditions not blowing to really make the race aggressive at the start, but it's going to be guaranteed a very aggressive final 40-30 kilometres.
Well, names that we'll be seeing a lot more of deeper into this race. Now, Quintana, of course, one of those. It'd be great to see whether he manages to re-find some of the glory days, and some of those for whom we had great expectations as well before, of course, this race even began, or many years ago. The likes of Louis Meintjes, I'd love to see him live up to what is becoming a higher billing this year. He's really found his mojo, which is great. I'd love to see Louis go well for Intermarché Wanty. They may go well with Alexander Kristoff today, but it's not long enough for him. He prefers all-out war, quite frankly, and in the worst conditions possible, because he sustains them extremely well. Another edifice for you to describe to us, John.
Another edifice. This one is the Saint-Riquier Church, which replaced a smaller church that was on the site from the 16th century. This one built in the 19th century and built using saltpeter, which is very popular up here in the north part of France. And I seem to remember something that you know rather more about than I do.
What, saltpeter?
Yeah.
In what regard?
I just seem to remember you waxing lyrical about it back in 2014 when we were wending our way through.
Was it something to do with explosives?
It might have been.
I don't think it's an appropriate conversation, bearing in mind what the world is doing at the moment. But yes, do be careful how you mix these things. 50.3 kilometres from home. I was wondering which alleyway you were taking me down there. The Côte de Ventouse, or Ventoux, we're not quite sure, but we're going to go with Ventouse, just to avoid any confusion, just in case you start looking for a radio antenna and a lack of trees, of which we've got plenty around here. Minute 36, Sean, 96 seconds. It's nothing. And look who's come to the fore. Bike Exchange suddenly starting to pick themselves up, looking for some slippage, I think, for Dylan Groenewegen to be at the front, re-find himself and then win the day. What do you think?
Well, that will be the certainly the tactic of the sprinters. Try and start as near to the front as possible and allow yourself that slipping room, meaning you can go back 50, 60, 70 places in the peloton and probably a bit further, and you're getting ever so close to the top of the climb before you find yourself in that position. But we can see here, there's nobody really pushing on big time at the moment. They're just keeping the pressure on, but it's not full gas racing at all. 125, still with just under the 50 kilometres to go. That's not a problem out to the breakaway, the two men. And now it's going to be a question, get ready for the final. But you can see the riders that are peeling to the front. A lot of the GC men are up there. We can see Pogačar. He's all the time there in that top 20 riders when we pan to the front of the peloton. And, that's where you've got to get now. Anybody thinking of doing something in the end of the GC at the end of this race and pass. You have to be careful on this one, because it is a tricky run in, and it's a danger one where we could see, if you're on the wrong end, you could lose time very quickly.
Well, we're just about to start our penultimate climb, you might think. Well, just count the rest of the climbs that we've got coming our way, including an absolute brute late on. There's only one categorised left after this, and that's the Cap Blanc-Nez, with ramps getting up to 12 and 13%. You see the way the terrain here just starts to welcome you with open arms, but it can dig a few nails into your back as well, quite frankly, so don't embrace it at your peril. Let's put it that way. This reasonably benign, although we do kick up to about 9% as a maximum, so we'll see how it is taken. This man has taken every single one of our KOMs so far today. I wonder if he might just get over the top of the Cap Blanc-Nez, but I don't think so, because they're almost going to get automatically caught today in the urgency for the push to build in a little bit of slippage into the final climb, I'll be bound, Robbie.
Yeah, and it's a given they're going to get caught. A minute and a half that the chasers, really brought them back quite quickly. But it's more than about the chase of these two. It's about keeping the pressure on the race and keeping the pressure on the sprinters, who may suffer a little bit more on the climbs, as we are now on one of the steeper sections of this Côte de Ventouse. You pronounce the yes, I've had it confirmed.
Thank goodness.
Well, Ventoux is O-U-X in any case. Indeed. So it's a completely different spelling and a different sound. This is the Côte de Ventouse. Towards the top, there's a section of 8%. So it's a bit of a kicker. Eases off before they get through the line of the KOM, where there's 1 point to be collected, most probably by Magnus Cort. We've seen that since the very first climb of the day on the Côte de Cassel, that there's been no more fighting over the mountain points, and Anthony Perez was permitted to take the intermediate sprint. So they've cut a deal to stop riding each other into the ground. But the peloton really bearing down on them. Just curious to see if now that pace has gone out of it a little bit compared to what Giulio Ciccone was doing on the last couple of climbs. And now the presence of Wout van Aert with his team on the left of Jumbo-Visma. Probably also keen if they've got Primož Roglic with them, which they haven't at the moment. He's on the other side. They'd be quite happy for it to go quite quick as well.
I'm looking at Wout van Aert. He looks better of pallor, Shauna. If there was an issue earlier on, it could have actually just been a misfeed, or who knows what. Maybe something disagreed with him at breakfast. I have no idea. But he looks happier now. And we had 5 visits to the car in the first half of the day. First 2/3 of it, I should say. But it looks like things have calmed for him a little bit, and we're glad of that.
Well, if you're going really well, you don't feel any problem. Go back to the car, go back to the rear of the peloton, even though it was, racing at times, and it did get a bit nervous where, a team pushed on. But some of those riders, you're so good, you don't even feel that pressure. And when we are talking about them, we're looking at it on our screens, we can see riders getting into difficulty. Those guys have no pressure at all, and I think Wout van Aert, I think it was part of that situation. He just came back to the car a number of times. It doesn't look like there was or there is any problem that sickness-wise, and hopefully not, because that's something we don't want to see with any of the riders, and especially not for the yellow jersey.
Indeed. Uncontested was Ventouse. And so quick last feed for many. They're grabbing some bags here, just making sure the sustenance is where it needs to be. So calm before the storm at the moment, Robbie.
Yep, certainly is. I thought after that initially going pretty hard on the climbs that they might have continued on this one, tried to make the best of it and use it as much as possible. See Chris Juul Jensen in the light blue colours of Bike Exchange, teammate of Dylan Groenewegen, maybe trying to just get up there and help to set a tempo that's more suited to his sprinter rather than suited to the sprinter of Giulio Ciccone, who is Mats Pedersen.
A man who's been at the front for much of the day, actually. He's just... gosh. Sorry, just heard something off mic there. I was actually thinking... You always worry whenever you hear that, particularly in track racing, but we've all got away with it. Apologies for that. Just 46.9 kilometres to go. A man who's been so busy today. is Ralf Majka. He's never been that far off the nose. He's taking his duties extraordinarily seriously, as you might expect, but handles it with such good grace and humour. Going to be hearing from Mads Pedersen in a very short while. Trek Segafredo keeping themselves. They've had proportionate representation up front, but you see also Team Bike Exchange are now offering themselves up after we mentioned the fact that they've been extremely quiet. Oh, hello, move your head. Oh, gosh. That was a bit of an Oppie-Ommi moment, but without the card. Yes, that was Hello Grandpa that didn't quite work out last year, did it? We'll be hearing from Mads Pedersen in a few moments' time. Minute 9, it's basically done for. Right? I think the chance of hanging out there as part of the breakaway to go over the Cap Blanc Ney is just too much to wish for Magnus Cort. He's done his job. Reasonable pace about today. Let's hear now from Mads Pedersen. I understand he's going to be speaking to us in English. What has the great man got to say for himself?
It's great to see you in good form, and we come to another day in your car. Kim Andersen did a really good recon of the following days too. So where's the point where your team is going to take it on for you, or are you guys going to wait for the bunch sprint at the end?
So you know, it's not ideal for us with a bunch sprint. We know I'm fast, but I'm not fast enough compared to Groenewegen or Jacobsen, for example. So of course we will try our stuff in the end of the final to get rid of them, but also it's a bit of wind, so we hope for some open parts where other teams want to join for a bit of crosswind, and then hopefully we can make it a hard day for the sprinters, and they miss the last bit of power in the sprint.
Did you have talks to other teams already about the crosswind section at the end, or is it then in the race more like? Not yet.
You know, we will cruise around in the beginning and chit-chat a bit and hear who's up for it.
Finding out who has what in mind.
Exactly.
Have fun. Good luck.
Thank you, man.
Well, he wasn't giving much away, but you wouldn't expect that either. And it looks like this Accord is... I think he's going to go for some red numbers for tomorrow by the looks of things. Magnus Cort has thought, this is madness. I've done my thing. I'm off.
Well, it's just like the other day, isn't it? A couple of days ago in Denmark that Magnus Cort said, off you go. I've got pretty much all the points on offer, except for the very last climb. But Magnus maybe started to think, well, I'm going to hold the jersey till the end of the week, at least till we get probably until La Planche de Belfi. And in terms of the rest of today, maybe being told by his team director, don't you think it might be better to save what energy you have left, try and recover as much as possible? Because tomorrow is a stage where, you know, if you'd saved all of your energy from the start, you would have been really competitive in. If you can recover well, you still might be able to have a crack.
Well, time for me to take a bow. Rob Hatch is rejoining us for our run to the finale. This has been a fantastic day so far, Rob. I know some people might have looked at it and thought, well, that's going to be quite benign, especially with two riders up the road. But it's been fascinating how it's been approached by the teams, isn't it?
And now I think it will be approached rather differently now from every team going into the last 43.5 kilometres to Carlton. It's certainly promising to be a big one as they go to the coast and that final climb, and maybe, as we've been speculating and Bobby and Sean were talking about, different teams ready to put the pressure on. So thanks, Carlton. We'll be off to the finish. 43.4 kilometres to go, and Anthony Perez with a minute and 20 out there, giving his all, giving his best to stay out as long as possible. And of course, a spot on the podium. There's the man with a red number on his back. It beckons at the end of the day. Left and right he goes, heading up towards the coast. Mainly a headwind right now. But the forecast was for the wind to die off in the afternoon. We'll see how much that does affect things. One thing that isn't going to happen now is any slowing up. The race is on. Sean Kelly, 43 Ks to go.
Yes, it is on, and yeah, you can see when you get back to the rear end of the peloton, that just shows the pace they're going at. You know, there's a line of riders here, and when you see that line at the end, the final 15 or 20 riders, it just tells the pace is very strong. And yeah, for some reason those riders are probably, you know, feeling it a bit more. Probably, you know, the talented riders the big names are all up the front, and you know, they seem to be cruising along with ease there, and we can see Pogačar's team there with a number of riders, you know, very much in control, and a lot of the other GC men on the front end of the race, and that's where you've got to be now. But you know, this final is another one where you have to be hyper careful, be ready, be in the position, and that's what 3-week tours are about, and that's what makes it difficult for GC men. You have to be present every day. Even though today is we're calling a sprinter's day, it's not a day where you can sit back anymore and just allow the race to go on. You have to be in the top end of the race, watch what's happening, be careful, and all of that is energy sapping. And you know that you know, the mental focus every day, it just takes, you know, so much from you over the 3 weeks. But that's what the big champions have got to win, 3-weekers.
It's often something we watch on the screen, Robbie. You and I are probably going to go now and talk about the sprint favourites and how they might wish to win. But, you know, 2 days down the line, and certainly when we get to races like the Planche des Belles Filles, they can have as good as a day off for them, can't they, providing they make the time limit. It's certainly a very different mental approach each and every day.
Yeah, it certainly is. You know, for the riders not riding for a green jersey, if you're concentrating on sprint victories, then, you know, a day like Planche des Belles Filles, you get to the foot of the climb, and all you got to do is get to the top. It doesn't matter how long it takes, really. If you're there with the bunch at the bottom, you're going to make the time cut. Because we see Magnus Cort coming back, doing the right thing by the team. He's been loaded up with bottles and gels into the feed bags, slung over his shoulder, and he'll make his way back through the bunch, find his teammates one by one, and start offering up the goodies. Something we so often see, you know, with 41 kilometres to go. It saves someone a trip back to the team car.
Yeah, well played, Magnus Cort. 3 breakaways out of 3. At least he had a friend to go up the road with today. Anthony Perez went with him. A little bit of a distraction, conversation, and of course, more importantly, on a physical sense, swapping of turns as well. That would have helped.
Yeah, Perez quite active last year, wasn't he, too, in the breaks? Remember his battle with Ida Schelling from the Bora team last year, going for the sprints on the top of each KOM. That was a ding-dong battle, but today Cort just intrinsically that bit faster that Perez decided he'd just settle for rolling cross in second each time.
Jonathan Castro Viejo there on the right-hand side. Christian Sbaragli through the middle. Christian Jensen again towards the front. And each and every one of the big teams are now making sure they're in position. Still 1 minute 26 before they catch Perez, the man you were just talking about, Robbie. And here he is, Cofidis. They'll be slightly disappointed that there's no Brian Coquard for them. There is, however, Max Walscheid to have a go in the sprints today. Of course, he had a big win just over the border from here, didn't he, earlier in the spring. 40 Ks to go. A reminder that Coquard missing with a very late COVID positive just before the start in Copenhagen. Here's the moment that Magnus Cort was dropped. Perez has continued. Cort ending his hat-trick of days in the breakaway. We're going to go and join a man who's been the breakaway and the peloton. It's Bradley Wiggins.
You join me, I'm just behind the lone leader now, Anthony Perez. On prend les autres directions, c'est bon, merci, ouais. We're just about to go past him now, but I tell you what, up here now it's quite exposed. We are up at a little bit of a plateau here still, not very high, but high enough here that the wind really is blowing now. You watch the flags as we go past these spectators in a moment. You'll see him now, we're just going past Anthony Perez. Just look at those flags there, look how they're blowing. There's sort of cross headwind at the moment, but we are snaking our way towards Calais here. And I tell you what, it's not going to be easy in that peloton behind. It will be something you have to pay a bit of attention to there. And a lot of teams will be trying to stay at the front here. But I imagine this guy here has done a deal with Magnus Cort today to just say, look, you take all the King of the Mountains points. Magnus will sit up, 40k to go. You can carry on. You'll take the Combativity Award because Cofidis, they are from this region. Of course, the main offices are in Lille, not too far away. So this was a big, I imagine, a big goal for them today to get someone in the breakaway to show off them Cofidis colours, of course. Long serving in the sport now, coming up to 25 years in sponsorship within cycling. So, yeah, lots to play for. We keep saying it here that, you know, the proverbial could hit the fan. Couple of gents with their backsides out there trying to get on telly. Not a good day for that. But yeah, I imagine this last 40k now, you really need to be attentive here because anything can happen in any stage of the Tour de France. But today especially, as I say, up here with the wind as we snake across here. This lone lead, Anthony Perez, as he makes his way to Calais. And with that, I'll hand you back to the capable hands of Rob Hatch.
Thanks, Bradley. I'm glad you mentioned the wind there because Dan Lloyd and I earlier on were talking about our disappointment when we had those little maybe geeky looks on our rest day. We probably should have been out doing other things yesterday, about the strength of the wind and the direction. And Brad says he could feel it getting up there on this little plateau. You can see the flags waving at the minute just about from the side, the right-hand side. Now, when they get to the coast today, they'll get to the coast at around 20 kilometres, just over 20 kilometres to go. They get to a town called Audiguin, which is just off the coast. But that's where there's a marked change of direction in the wind. Now, unfortunately, at around 5 p.m, it's now about 17 minutes to 5 p.m. when we hit the coast, it's due to be pretty calm at about 5 to 10 kilometres per hour. However, at 6 o'clock, just an hour and a quarter's time, it's due to swing around, become a cross tailwind, and get up above 20 kilometres per hour. There might be a few people at the front of that peloton, Robbie McEwen, worried that the forecast might not be right and it's getting up a little early.
From what I'm seeing, Rob, I don't want to burst the bubble, but I'm going to.
Oh, come on, mate.
The wind is going to stay the same. 5 knots is the forecast throughout the evening, so the wind is not going to be the factor. I'm pretty confident in that. But as you say, they do take that turn at 23 kilometres to go. They come out towards, not quite right on the coast just yet at that point, but right near it, 23 kilometres to go. And even though there is not much wind, everybody knows there's not enough to really split a peloton. It's not going to stop them racing for position to be there just in case. Because they all have the same thought, you cannot be too careful.
And you can see the channel in the distance. Just beyond that huge quarry there.
Oh, they've also got some field art. Look at this.
They've
Zooming
done
in.
pretty well.
Yeah. It's probably well above the UCI weight regulation of 6.8 kilo.
Jonathan, where does it stand on the Homageometer, that one? This is a rather unique one.
It is a unique one. It's in the middle of the Vallée Heureuse quarry. There's a limestone quarry here, which has been just the daily production capacity of 20,000 tonnes. I don't think that particular bike measured right up there, but yeah, it without a doubt, Robbie, would have been over the UCI allowance.
Yeah, well, I've always in the past done a score of field art out of 10, and although it's simplistic, I'm going to give that one an 8, just for the amount of work it would have taken to move those boulders into position.
I mean, a little like Stonehenge. How did they get them there? That's the question I'm asking myself. I think you've been overly generous with an 8 on stage 4 of the Tour.
I think the same way they built Stonehenge. They just used mining machinery.
Exactly right.
Oh, in this part of the world, it was Asterix and Obelix, wasn't it? Well, that's interesting. We're going to have a league table then between Jonathan and Robbie this year of the Homageometer scores, because you both in your past tours apart have been giving scores out. We've got you both at the same time this year, so there you go. We might have to have a competing table of homage scores.
We'll see if we can disagree for the entire tour.
Oh, that won't be difficult, don't you worry about that. Perez has nobody to disagree with at the minute, the man from the southwest of France. Robbie and Dan have already talked up his combative capacities. And there are friends from Pro Cycling Stats on the left-hand side. Oops. Oh, dear. Now then, what's happened behind? There's certainly a few riders with foot on the ground there. Louis Meintjes at the back, 1, 2, 4. Not too sure if anybody's gone to ground, but there was certainly a narrowing there.
Yeah, you can see the culprit, absolutely, that narrowing the road. It's just, you know, you can't fit 12 riders into a gap that's fit for 7. And eventually someone has to give, someone has to break, and it filters its way back through the peloton. And there's always a victim one way or another. At least in this occasion, it didn't look like anybody actually hit the deck.
Yeah, and riders just getting back on at the back there, and there's a little bit of calm in any hostilities there at the front.
Here we see it from the helicopter. There it is again, trying to squeeze in, all slowing down, then re-accelerating. And that's the kind of little thing we can see along the course towards the end. If we get that again, they could be really decisive moments in the race. Everybody's gesturing towards it, warning each other, but nobody wants to be the one to back off.
They fought for the position, they want to hold it. And that's how it will stay now for the final 35 kilometres of this race. Brandon McNulty on his way back. A little look down at his left elbow there, but we can't see anything. American rider who still qualifies for the best young rider classification, by the way. Mark Hirschi, Mikkel Bjerg and Tadej Pogačar. Pogačar currently in the white jersey, third on the GC. There's Mikkel Bjerg at the back as well, just behind Mark Hirschi, who was a late call-up to replace Matteo Trentin in one of the numerous COVID changes for this race.
I think that was the most important change coming into this, Rob, that Matteo Trentin, the man who would have been designated to look after Tadej Pogačar on a stage like this one, all through Denmark, but in particular tomorrow on the stones of Roubaix. I think that they could really miss his presence. Not that Tadej Pogačar can't fend for himself and get through it well, but Matteo Trentin had been picked specifically for that role. That stage was his main aim in this Tour de France. They didn't have a like-for-like replacement. They put in Mark Hirschi, who, no disrespect, he's a great rider, but a different type of rider.
Yeah, I think you'd think that, I mean, looking very quickly down the list, that the responsibility for that might pester Mikkel Bjerg or Vegard Starkelongen tomorrow, but they do not have the same experience as a Matteo Trentin. Let's go to some experience now with Bernie Eisel.
25 kilometers from the finish line, there will be some proper action that is starting. But already 28 kilometers from the finish is a little climb, uncategorized, but it's in 2 steps. You get to the top, all open, head crosswind, as you can see here. And then you come down here. It's a bit twisting downhill, super fast, but the teams will get to the front at this little climb. Stay at the front because 500 meters further down here, road narrows, drops down again, and then we have a tail crosswind section towards the finish. The wind at the moment is pretty low, but there's gusts, and let's see how it gets later on in the day and what the riders have in their mind.
Well, thanks very much there to Bernie Eisel. Of course, just bursting the bobble there, as Robbie was talking about the strength of that wind as well before. But the direction is correct, as we see Vive le Tour. Local workers in that quarry. Hope they've all got their Discovery Plus and GCN Plus installed so they can watch the race on the run. Of course, come for the race, stay for the ride. Something for everybody to enjoy on Discovery Plus and GCN Plus. And well, if you like racing in the wind, if you like this fighting for positioning, this is your moment, Sean.
Yes, we can see here it's really hotting up here in the front of the peloton, and everybody is just pushing for space and trying to keep their position. And you know, we did hear from Bernie there, when you get to that 25 kilometre mark where we do turn right, you know, the wind direction will change a bit. It's not a real strong wind for this area of France, but when you're in the final, when they race at such a high speed, just a little bit of wind can cause a lot of problems. And all this, street furniture as well, that's what's on the teams and the riders' minds.
Welcome back, everybody. Local thoughts being passed on to all of those suffering in Ukraine. And the local thoughts come from the north of France today on stage 4 of this Tour de France. We're in twisty, turny, local roads, plenty of obstacles. There's a little bit of fighting already, Sean, and tempers are frayed there.
Yes, we can see Bauer there, trying to push Van Hooydonk, and he not allowing him to be pushed around here and starting to give out. And that just tells, the nerves are fraying a bit. Everybody is, really tense here. Everybody has got a job to do, and they're trying to protect. In Van Hooydonk's case, he's going to have to protect, the men that he needs to protect, and the yellow jersey, of course, and the 2 GC men, Vingegaard and Roglic, and it's just tension is starting to build here, and you can see in the open sections, you know, it's really pushing on. Nobody want to lose their position. You get into the towns, a little bit of shelter. You can see it's knocking back a bit. And when you're on the front, you can do that. You can slow the pace down. And when you get out on the open roads, when there's a space to move up, that's where you have to, you know, push on again to make sure that you do not get crowded out and riders start coming up on your left and right.
We're just a few kilometres from the coast now and the channel. This is the front of the peloton, all bunched up, everybody fighting for that same little bit of road, and then the long line of riders that are playing catch-up here. You can see the stress on this shot. One minute and 7 for Perez, who's doing a great job to hang on there. And we've just seen our first little bit of fisticuffs at the front. Jack Bauer, Nathan Verhooydonk, two riders well known in the classics. And it's that sort of riding here. You really have to have your wits about you. You have to be present. And Robbie, I guess you have to assert yourself.
You do absolutely have to assert yourself and make it really clear with the way you ride, with your body language, that you're absolutely going to ride at the front and nobody is going to push you away from that position. You see Jack Bauer's got Dylan Groenewegen with him. And each team will have identified the pinch points, those spots where you absolutely have to be in front. And there's just no two ways about it. You must be there or you can and will get caught out. And, you know, especially for Dylan Groenewegen, Fabio Jakobsen, one of the most important point is going to be at the foot of that final climb. But every team's being told the same thing at this point. Just be at the front when you turn right. It's not very windy, but... and they're all saying, but it could be. But someone might go anyway.
And there was that feeling that was transmitted to us from our good mate Bernie Eisel as well. There isn't much wind, but the direction's right, as we were telling you about the forecast. And there's just that, will it get up? Will it gust? Probably not, as you were stressing earlier on, Robbie, but just in case, they have to be there. And it can be a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. You can have the chaos created just by that fighting for position. You see all these big names here now. Ewan through the centre in the red jersey, Dainese Degenkolb in that black jersey in the centre as well. On the left-hand side, we saw another team, I think it was Bike Exchange, keeping their riders to the front. Peter Sagan was never far away. He's so good at that with all of his experience as well. Just following the right wheels and his bike handling skills. He's not going to be one of those guys, Sean, is who's going to get stressed at all by this.
No, and, you know, it's something, if you've got that, well, it's, you know, a great talent to have. You can, you know, stay up there, stay in the position, the peloton, where you get maximum shelter, you get carried along, because there's a big difference in, you know, being in the top 3 or 4 here in the first line, or you go back maybe 7 or 8 places in the middle. You get, you know, a huge amount of advantage with, you know, the drafting. You're just carried along in that suction of the peloton. But to hold that position is always difficult. And, you know, there's a lot of riders will get pushed back slowly and they end up, you know, going back 30th, 40th position in the peloton. But if you're a good bike handler like Sagan, you know, you can lean on guys. You're not allowed to be, you do not allow yourself to be pushed out, and you can hold that position. And that is huge advantage, energy saving, like in a stage. And the longer you can do that, you know, into the end of the stage is so important. But, you know, talking about Perez here, I don't know if this is for Cuffer, is it the thing to do here today, to go out on a long solo like this, because, you know, you're going to get very little. I know he's going to get the red number, but he is a rider in the next number of days. You'd expect him to be able to filter breakaways. And, you know, talking about Planche de Belfi as well, you guys are saying for the sprinters, yeah, it's an easy day. No guarantee either for the day, because we could have so many riders want to get into that break in the earlier part, and there's probably 80 kilometres before we have our first climb. So that could be a dog of a day, as they say in cycling terms, and it could work out to be, you know, a real difficult day for everybody. So in a race, you know, you just never know what's going to happen, and that is the great thing about bike racing.
Yeah, Perez is a top rider, isn't he? I mean, he's won 4 bike races in his career, including the Classique Loire Atlantique earlier this season. So he's not, with all respect to riders who've made a career out of it, one of those guys who just goes up and gets the telly time. When he gets in breaks, they're usually serious ones. I think he was in 3 or 4 breaks, as we were talking about last year at the Tour de France. And he's here on this day where riders are acting as if it were a classic. Just we're getting new viewers each and every time we broadcast. All the many hours we have to be able to bring you now. We're so lucky to be able to watch all these extra hours of bike racing in the last few years, Robbie. But just for those, because I'm conscious of the fact that during the Tour de France we get a lot of people watching the bike racing who've maybe not watched it before. They might tune in for the scenery and want to get to know the sport a bit. They might like learning to cook with Jonathan. But for this sort of racing here, we've been talking about the Jack Bauer and the Nathan van Hooijdonks there at the front. Now, in spring, on the one-day, what we call classics races, they'd be used to being at the front on these sort of races. But just explain to the viewers why it might be a little bit different in a race like the Tour de France, because you've got a mix of different riders trying to do it, and I guess it's a strange mix. It's not the mix we're used to be seeing in spring.
Yes, it is. The Tour de France, it offers up opportunities for all different types of riders, where if we look back at the spring classics, the one-day races, you've got Liège, Bastogne-Liège for the climbers, you've got the Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, more for the big, heavier set, powerful classics men that cruise across the cobbles. In the Tour de France, you get the real mix, because you've got to have a well-rounded team for all terrain and support a leader on every single stage. Quite often we'll see those classic style riders like a Jack Bauer or a Nathan van Hooijdonk. They'll be used as a domestique, so not as much as to get in a break or try and win the race as such, but look after the team leaders and make sure they're getting the easiest passage possible, whether that's Jack Bauer riding for Dylan Groenewegen today and just keeping him in the wheel, keeping him in the slipstream to save his energy as much as possible, or on another day, say a Nathan van Hooijdonk is just trying to guide Primož Roglič safely through one of the flatter stages where things can get really hectic, like they are bound to get tomorrow on the cobbles that are used in Paris-Roubaix. So there's horses for courses, but you can use them in very different ways depending on who the team leader is that day and the type of terrain they're going to tackle.
27.5 kilometres from the finish. Now, this is the section of road just before we saw Bernie Eisel talking to us a moment ago. And he talked about this uncategorised climb, and here it is, it's steep. Still 1 minute and 9 for Perez. He was just seen on the radio a moment ago. He has this fleet of cars and motorbikes behind him that the pace continues in the peloton, and you can just see coming the shot now. Will start to come down quickly, and it's Christopher Juul Jensen again. Bike Exchange trying to make it 2 wins in 2 days, either side of the first rest day. And where to go rejoin Bernie Eisel.
I'm here on the final climb of today, a Cat 4. But the riders will come down here. Pretty much no wind, but it's beautiful here. They drop down here into this little village, winding road, but then it gets tricky. Through the town, it narrows down. Really, really attention for the riders. They will have the leaders all at the front because they know what's coming up. The climb itself, good gradient. It's a great atmosphere up here, I can tell you. Fans from all over the world. But who's standing out? Of course, France, Belgium, and the British fans here. And I can show you the finish line and the atmosphere up here. It is absolutely great.
Bernie and his extras
getting there. Bernie and his extras. He needs a clipboard. Do you reckon it was one take? Brilliant stuff from Bernie out there. And he was talking about the British fans. On one of the helicopter shots we had a moment ago, you could actually see southeast England. There we are, maybe in the distance again. Certainly the White Cliffs were visible.
You could just about swim that.
Bit of training needed. Certainly from where I'm sitting. Jennifer Barlow appears at the front for Ineos Grenadiers. Luke Rowe's behind him. 26 kilometres to go. And they will all know what is to come after the top of that climb. Of course, the sports directors in the cars will have talked about it in the meeting, I'm sure. They'll have the Velo Viewer, other applications on their tablets up in the cars. They'll be talking through everybody where they need to be. And you can tell it's one of the key points, the twists and turns, Sean, because it's not just the sprint teams who are at the front. It's the GC guys as well. And we had a really good demonstration. It wasn't a nice demonstration because we saw riders lose time. I mean, the headline name was probably Oran, wasn't he? 39 seconds. But towards the end of that final of the 3 stages in Denmark, we had another of those crashes, didn't we? 10, 11 Ks from the finish. And if you get caught up behind that, if you're not at the front, that is why we're seeing riders being positioned there, just in case.
Yes, well, it's, you know, so familiar in the beginning stages of a 3-weeker. You know, you have the teams who are riding to win stages, and then you have the general classification men with their team domestics. They want to keep the guys out of danger, keep them up, not to lose any time. And we did see on Sunday stage in the very end, which wasn't technical at all, but, you know, you did say Robbie Rigoberto Oran, we had Caruso, Haig, Menkes, you know, all losing a bit of time there, and that's not what you want to do. You don't want to lose anything against the other GC men, and for that reason, those stages that we've had in Denmark, the one again today, tomorrow, of course, is a real special one, but today now there's final 25 kilometres. Even you can take the last 50 kilometres like this, just fighting for positions all the time, and you know, that's what you've got to do, and that's what you need a team for. And you're hoping that you keep your race leader, team leader out of danger. And we remember last year, for example, the crashes we had in the earlier part, and the men went out of the race, GC riders, the riders who got badly injured and weren't able to compete for their targets in that race. That's what every team is concerned about in these early days.
And we're also going to have the race into the final climb as well. Tops out at 10.8 kilometres from the finish. It climbs out of a town called Escales and climbs to Côte du Cap Blanc-Nez. It's a short climb, just over a kilometre long, but there are some very, very high gradients. Perez, and his gap is lowering to below a minute now. Just under 25 kilometres to go. This way to Calais. He's made the right turn now. The wind had been blowing. There it is there. Well, it's certainly up, but as you can see, it's across the road. And if it continues to get up, it might not split the race, as Robbie was saying, but it will cause the nerves just to build up.
And that's the thing about a crosswind. Even if it's a light one, it causes certainly the bunch to get excited. But the faster you ride, the more impact that a slight cross breeze will have. So you can get the race under pressure. It only takes one to lose the wheel at high speed, and they can open up a very large gap. You see the riders from Jumbo-Visma are looking around, looking for the presence of Primož Roglic. Got a Lotto rider in between them there. They're also up there for Caleb Ewan. But Jumbo-Visma, they are right where they need to be at the moment, the right-hand side there with the yellow helmets. Wout van Aert, of course, not in the yellow helmet, but the rest is. Resplendent in the yellow skin suit today. Peter Sagan up through the middle, making sure he is in place. Not a teammate with him at the moment, but he's a man who just surfs his way through the peloton with ease.
Riders coming up to protect Alexander Vlasov as well. Nils Pollitt and Marco Haller are both there. Might allow Danny van Poppel to have a go at the sprint. Of course, if it gets to be all hands to the pump, you imagine he'll be given the curly finger and told to protect Vlasov as well. Certainly given the fact he wouldn't be one of the favourites to win the sprint. Plenty of road furniture left and right as well, and that's the Église Saint-Pierre. Nervous moments, lots of pointing, lots of shouting left and right. The mental chaos, everything that Sean was talking about not too long ago about being up there every single day, being proved here. And look at the pace. The gap is disappearing into the thin air right in the northern French coast. 80 kilometres per hour the following motorbike, and 34 seconds is the gap. Up and down still, it's not entirely flat yet.
No, nice little twisting descent and come into the dip and another little rise up. So as you can just see, 82 kilometres at the back of the peloton, at the front into the 70s. You can just see the intensity of the race. They're doing nearly 70 kilometres an hour, but they're widespread all across the road from gutter to gutter. So to look at it in that way, you think, well, they're not trying that hard. They're all across the road, but they're all just going that fast. That's the how stiff the competition is to be at the front of the peloton at this point. Just that pure nervousness about being caught out and how important positioning is, even though they can already feel the wind is probably not high enough to cause any real damage. You've just got to be there.
And as well, they'll be told to be there at the moment.
Well, the other thing is, if you're even mid-bunch from now to the finish, it can be very hard to move up, because where do you do it? Where do you go? And we saw the other day, and I was actually curious, as we see here Mikkel Bjerg, back of the peloton. He's been doing plenty of work for the team, keeping Pogačar out of trouble, and he's being tailed off. But that phenomenon of trying to work your way through this bunch, it is really, really difficult to do at these high speeds when they're gutted to gut. And we saw Quinn Simmons get a rather hefty fine for what was called riding on the pavement. As you see another rider overboard who's been doing plenty of work today as well. As you said, Alex Kirsch from Trek Segafredo been trying to make the race hard to the advantage of Mads Pedersen. But when you're trying to move up, it's just so incredibly difficult, and 20 kilometres just flies by when you're out of position. You seem to run out of kilometres to get yourself up and near the front.
Well, we're 10 kilometres away from our final climb now. Sean, can you expect other teams to do the same as what we saw in the last couple of climbs, to make it hard again, to try and put the likes of Jakobsen and Groenewegen in trouble?
Yes, I think it's pretty much a guarantee. There's teams going to have to and will try to, really keep a very strong pace. And I mean, from the start of the climb, just, hit it full on, full gas, and try and just stretch out the peloton. And hopefully they will be able to break the peloton. There'll be gaps appear, and the sprinters, will be in the grooves that are further back. That will be guaranteed, I think, a tactic they have to try. And yeah, you're going to have, the mixture of all the teams there is going to be a hectic one. To get onto the final climb, there's going to be the big fight, and then on the climb itself, another, big fight to try and get over in a good position.
Off the beaches, onto the road. And this is the peloton of the Tour de France inside the final 20 kilometres now on stage 4. It's our first day in French territory. We still have 2 more nations to visit, in Belgium and Switzerland. For now, though, the first French stage set to end in a bunch sprint. There's just one man to catch up the road, but there are still other obstacles. The wind's blowing, there's a hill to go. Let's go back into the race. Here's Bradley.
Join me just in front of that lone leader, Anthony Perez. He's just got about 30 seconds now, and I think that his day will nearly be up in the next sort of 5-6 kilometres or so, and we are probably set for a bunch sprint today. If he looks over his left shoulder, just about a kilometre back, he would have seen the White Cliffs of Dover. So close he could touch them. Great day out this has been. The weather's fantastic, and we're heading to Calais now for what looks like it's going to be a bunch sprint. And with that, I'm going to shoot off to the finish and see you at the finish and leave you in the capable hands of our commentary team. Goodbye.
Thanks for all the insight, Bradley. We'll catch up with you after the finish. It's going to be a finish that's getting here rapidly, because we have from right to left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 trains here, maybe with a space for somebody to poke their heads out through the middle. The fight for position has been won by Jumbo-Visma, Bora Hansgrohe, Lotto Soudal, then you have DSM and Ineos Grenadiers. But the washing machine, I think, will be about to be turned up, Sean, to full max now.
Yes, it will be. And our sole leader out here, Perez, he's doing a great ride, and I think there will be talk tonight. Yeah, what a pity there wasn't 5 or 6 riders in that breakaway, and if they had been allowed the advantage that 2 men were given, well, then it would have been a real interesting final. The peloton would certainly have, to push on much earlier to close them down, but unfortunately, sole out here on your own, it's going to be an impossible task, and it always looked like it was going to be pretty much a non-runner for the breakaway. But yeah, we can see here front of the peloton we have a lot of the GC teams holding control on the front end. You have also the sprinters team want to be here, and as you said, Rob, that washing machine effect, that's something you want to stay ahead of that. If you feel that they're coming up on your left and right and you are a little bit in the centre, then you have to push on a bit more the pace to try and hold the front end and hold your position in the bunch.
Well, you see that signal, that gutter sticking out from Luke Rowe, immediately telling his teammates to be ready. The last one of them could unfortunately just roll over the edge of it. We saw just a few moments ago, that sort of gap in the middle. That's been filled now by the Bike Exchange team, as Luke Durbridge now in discussion with is that Cron or Van Moor. I think Van Moor from Lotto Soudal. So we've got Ineos on the left, led by Luke Rowe, and DSM for Alberto Dainese. Luke Durbridge, Bike Exchange in the middle for Dylan Groenewegen. Lotto for Caleb Ewan. You can see him just through the gap there, that small, stocky figure. And Bora Hansgrohe protecting Vlasov, but also trying to get Danny Van Poppel up there. He's been in the top 10 twice. He was 4th on stage 2. And, of course, on the right-hand side for Wout van Aert, Vingegaard and Roglic. Jumbo-Visma led by Thies Benoot.
Into Vissant in the Pas-de-Calais region here in northern France.
See that up ahead? That's the start of those couple of hills, not just the last categorised climb, but there's a punchy little one before it as well. Le Cap de Nergris and then the Neige Blanc. But very open from the top of the last climb. I've been informed that the 4 kilometres after that, quite open, and any breeze will be hitting them from the side.
A brilliant shot there from the helicopter, just showing in 3D the hills that Robbie McEwen was explaining are still to come. As a prologue to the final climb, if you like. It's hill followed by hill, kicker followed by kicker, and the stats for the second one: 1 kilometre at 7.2%, a gradient of above 10% in places. It's a bit like a climb in a Tour of Flanders, isn't it, Sean?
Yes, it is. Short climbs, you know, very, very steep in sections, and unfortunately, you know, you have such a mixture of riders here and a mixture of teams wanting to fight for the places. It's a complicated one, but you know, they all know what they've got to do here, and you have to get onto the climb in a good position, the position you like to be in. And when you get onto the position, for some riders like the GC men, if you're in the real good position, the top 10 or 15, they will be comfortable enough to get up the climbs. It's the sprinters who want to be up there as well, but they're going to have problems if the pace is really hot, and they're going to start slipping. So there's so much going on, so many different tactics within different teams, depending on what riders you have for this sort of final.
Well, you know, guys, that exactly what Sean just said with the different types of riders. The climbers, they're happy to start near the front, and even if they get shuffled a little bit, they know they can make up ground on the climb itself. But if we look down from the helicopter, in the centre in the light blue, Dylan Groenewegen, his 3rd position in those light blue colours, he knows he needs to start right near the front and give himself distance to drift in the peloton and get over the top and still in that bunch, where there's others like to keep themselves a lot closer to the front and see if they can actually get a split over the top of the climb. So there's different approaches depending on the climbing abilities of the riders up there. One I haven't seen yet is Fabio Jakobsen and the Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl team, trying to position him near the front for this final hill. Either they're not too worried about it, or they've just not started their move towards the front quite early enough.
Looked like he was in about 10th to 15th position through the middle. Of course, if you're looking for the sprinters today, if you're looking for Wout van Aert, he is, of course, in the yellow jersey. Fabio Jakobsen is in the green jersey today, looking after it for him. The other day's winner, Dylan Groenewegen, still in that blue and white of Bike Exchange. And then, of course, we have the whole other field of contenders, led by Caleb Ewan in the red jersey, right through the middle, as Robbie was explaining a moment ago. There's the likes of Christophe and Dainese to throw into the mix. Another blue jersey for Jasper Philipsen, Peter Sagan, as he is most years. When he's not the world champion, he's the Slovakian champion. He's in the white jersey for Total Energy. Still in the red and white jersey. This is a great ride from Anthony Perez.
Yeah, it certainly is a really good fighting ride from Perez. And I'm with you, Rob. I'm also running the GCN app on my phone on the side. I hit rewind a couple of times, but there's Jakobsen. I missed him. So as you said, he's quite near the front, and they know exactly the job they need to do.
Yeah, there he is, to the right-hand side of the picture now. Green helmet.
Bright green, yep. So he's more or less where he needs to be. And well, I'll be interested to see who really kicks it off first, and if they really nail it from the bottom, because Mads Pedersen from Trek Segafredo, he made no secret of their intentions at the start of the stage. He said, we want to get rid of Jakobsen and Groenewegen because I'm just not as fast as them. So we know what we need to do, we know where we need to do it, and that's what we're going to try and do.
And Sean, this is the first of the two climbs. Of course, we're concentrating on the categorised climb, which comes in about 2.5 kilometres time, but this is the preview. I guess if you are Trek Segafredo, you'll know that this is coming as well, and this is as good an opportunity as any to start the party, isn't it?
Well, it is. There's an opportunity here, depending on the wind conditions, but it's turning all the time, as we can see here. So the wind direction is changing. But if you're riding into a headwind, well, then you're just going to kill yourself, and you're not going to cause much problems to the men you need to do that too. So you have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, if there's an opportunity, they will definitely try and do it. And talking about Jakobsen, that he's in a perfect position, right in the middle, in about 12th maybe place. He's just getting carried along, and I like that as a rider. Just get sucked along in the middle of the peloton. It's amazing the energy he can save, and you know, he feels that he's in a good position. And will he be good enough to get over the climb?
Now, this is Anthony Turgis, not the sort of man you'd expect to be off the back here. Of course, already lost a lot of time, but I imagine that his priority will be a stage win at some point, so losing a little bit more time is probably going to help him in that endeavour. Done his job for the day, you imagine. A couple of other riders off the back left-hand side.
I was still surprised, Robert, to see that. Anthony Turgis, that could have been a really good guy to try and help launch Peter Sagan into position. It's not like he's been riding on the front all day, so either, you know, given the go-ahead to just drop off and lose time and look for breaks in the next few days, or maybe just not feeling well, which is also, you know, we've seen that so much over the last couple of years in the peloton. Anyway, back to the front. Luke Durbridge here in the middle of screen, shepherding Dylan Groenewegen, and there he is with the graphic right on him. Fabio Jakobsen about, well, 20 places behind, despite only being 2 rows further back than Dylan Groenewegen.
Yellow jersey really well protected over to this near side. He's on the radio at the moment, is Wout van Aert. Remember, second in Copenhagen, second on day 2, second in Sunnerbo. 3 second places so far, and only Alfredo Binda has finished in second place on the opening 3 stages of a Tour before, as Alex Kirsch has dropped for a second time. But you were explaining earlier on, Robbie, that he's done a great job a few days back. Now then, well, movement on the left-hand side. Look at this. This is Luke Rowe, Luke Durbridge, and on the right for Hooydonk is trying to catch up as well. That battle for position going into the final climb has really kicked off. Sean, look at what it's done to the gap. 14 seconds, halved in about 5 pedal strokes there.
Well, you can see the way they're driving around the front there, and you know, the speed. If we can just see the motorbike, I think we're going probably close to 80 kilometers per hour here. But you could see Pidcock there, just over on the right-hand side of the peloton as they're travelling. He's freewheeling along, so it just shows, you know, how much energy you can spare if you're in a good position. But yeah, Perez, you know, he will be swallowed up now, because we're coming to the real vital point of this stage with the final climb coming up.
And he's on to the final climb now. 900 metres to the top of climb number 6 of the day for Anthony Perez. Alongside Magnus Cort, he's animated stage 4 of the Tour de France. But behind, it's all about now trying to make the move, and Jumbo-Visma are even causing splits at the bottom here.
It's a flashback
to the top.
It's a flashback to Paris-Nice
on the opening day. Yep, it's just like Paris-Nice on the opening day, and they've caught everybody off guard here.
Well, they knew they were going to try and do it. It was just that fight for position. Who could make the acceleration at the right time? But they've got themselves to the front, and they are opening up the burners completely. Thies Pinot gets out of the saddle. Wout van Aert, and it is splitting up. Geraint Thomas at the back of the group, hanging on as well. Laporte is there. Roglic is there as well, splitting behind them.
And this is why all of the GC riders also needed to be at 10th, because you've got Vingegaard, Roglic, Yates. This could be a twofold attack, Sean.
Yes, well, we can see there's a lot of the GC men here on tour, but definitely Jumbo-Visma with Benoit here just really driving it on. This is going to cause major problems for the sprinters. There's definitely going to be splits as we come over the top.
This is causing splits for his own team. Roglic is off the wheel.
Roglic down off that wheel. As we look behind, it's Wout van Aert and Vingegaard is following. Adam Yates is up there. You could see that Geraint Thomas has dropped as well on the left-hand side. They're all over the road coming to the top here, and Wout van Aert is taking this on his own. It's a demonstration here from the yellow jersey with 10 kilometres to go. Van Aert too strong for Yates. Vingegaard behind. Wout van Aert is on fire.
Well, if he's going to do this, he needs to get rid of Yates. They can't just give him a free ride with Vingegaard and no Roglic there. So Van Aert pushing on at the moment. He's making Yates do the chase to try and cross the gap. Roglic about to come around the corner. Yes, there he is with Geraint Thomas as well. Danny Martinez, Romain Bardet.
There's Pogacar. There is Pogacar following, and then it's get organised if you can. Robbie, we're going to let you go and get organised as well now. We'll catch you on the breakaway a little later on, and the way it's panning out, you might have quite a bit to talk about.
I'm going to chase back on. I'll see you at the finish.
Sean Kelly with me, Rob Hatch, for the final 10 kilometres to take you home, and Dylan Groenewegen, one of the many casualties off the back, Sean.
Yes, well, it's not surprising. We can see there's big men in difficulty here, but that pace being set by Jumbo-Visma, Benoot, he just went too strong and exploded everything here, and Van Aert, he just followed. He's going on his own here, but this is, still 10 kilometres to go, and we can see Yates trying to come back with, the other Jumbo man, but there's a lot of other riders coming back here. I think if you just go that little bit slower on the climb and pull maybe 10 or 15 riders with you, it's probably the best tactic, but the way they attacked it there, they just even blew. Roglic wasn't able to follow.
Groenewegen in the chase, and Van Aert continues here. They are ones, twos. It's like watching the end of a classic race, this.
Yes, well, we can see here, there's a group coming across. We can see Yates has been, joined by Geraint Thomas and Martinez and a lot of the other favourites. You can see Gaudu was very close to the front. But then there's another big group of riders. So it's going to be immediately, 20 riders, maybe even possibly 30 riders. And for Wout van Aert to do this on his own, if he does hold everybody off here, this will be a phenomenal ride.
And for those watching who weren't with us during Paris-Nice, the event that we were all referring to on that climb, the Deja Vu we mentioned, was on the opening stage in Mont-la-Ville in northern France. Christophe Laporte won the stage. Primož Roglic came with him in second place. Wout van Aert rolled over in third, and it was a team effort, almost like splitting the race together. One huge pull that they continued with. Yes, we've only got Van Aert here, but it was amazingly similar what we saw then, Sean.
Yes, it was, and it was very close to finish, of course. There was only a number of kilometres, so that's where it's important, with the longer distance to finish from this final climb, you need a number of riders together, and if you can have, 2 or 3 plus from the team, well, then that is very important. Wout van Aert on his own here, we can see he's doing a great job, 18 seconds. Unless they start looking around and who's going to do the chasing, this might not be enough of an advantage, still with over 7.5 to go.
Question is, who is doing the chasing? For now, it is Trek Segafredo, and that looks like Jesper Stuyven. But he has Jumbo riders on his wheel. Peter Sagan's also in there with Bettiol as well. 7 kilometres to go, 21 seconds the gap for Wout van Aert. The organisation's going to start. You can see that Alpecin de Koenig are bringing a couple of riders up there, but I'm sure there's a lack of big numbers for any one team to chase here, Sean.
Yes, well, it's definitely going to be a question, who has got numbers here, who has got, 2 or 3 riders are prepared, are able to ride for their sprinter here. That is going to be vital.
Well, Wout van Aert adding to his lead in the general classification. 23 seconds here. And whatever happens on the cobbles in the next few days, if he brings this home and he brings home a gap, as you see the move made, set up by Benoot, Vingegaard following. Adam Yates was there. Can we read anything into the fact that Roglic couldn't follow? Or is it just the way the race broke up?
Well, I think it's, just the time we're in the race, of course, a very short climb like that. Such an explosive, this was a huge explosive push on by Benoot and by the other teammates before that, and there's a lot of riders there, the GC men, who are in difficulty, but I would not take anything from that. It's just that such a big effort by a rider like Benoot. He can do that explosive effort, the others just not able to follow, or maybe not going too deep either, and they see who's up front, and you can afford maybe to just watch and look and follow some of the other GC men.
So Alpecin de Koenig is the team that's getting organised now. You can only imagine that Philipsen is in this group now, and back out of that, Mathieu van der Poel. Dylan van Baarle is doing the chasing for the Ineos Grenadiers. Behind you have Stefan Kung ready to contribute as well. It's Ineos Grenadiers committing to the chase here. Is this because they're worried about giving a rival team advantage in the GC, or is it because they think that maybe Thomas Pidcock can do something?
Well, I think it's more for their leaders, and we can see Geraint Thomas very close. Yates was also, very much up there. We see Martinez. So those riders, they're in close proximity to the front of the peloton. So that's the reason Van Baarle is riding here. Just keep the pace high, because if you slow down, well, then there's a lot of riders going to come up left and right, and you get crowded out. So keep the pace real high, and by doing that, you keep a real good position on the front end of the bunch.
Well, less than 5 kilometres to finish in Calais now on this stage of the Tour de France, stage 4, as Alpecin Koenig lose another man. It's a big effort from Michael Gurgel, but he's out the back now. Riders in ones and twos get back on all the time, but there's a real lack of organisation to bring it back. The gap has been increasing, if anything, and there's a third group off the back containing Dylan Groenewegen. They're at 25 seconds from the next group. Miguel Honoré is the rider from Denmark, and Quick Step behind. So the first few seconds have been chipped off. It's been growing until now, but it's just stabilised at 26, 27 seconds. 4Ks to go. Sean, is this coming back?
Well, it's looking real good for Van Aert, and he's doing, a super ride here, because the riders on the front of the peloton we see there, they're pushing on at as much as possible, and he is still holding on big time. 26 seconds, just over 3.5 to go. I was concerned, the numbers that were going to be there, and you only need 4 or 5 riders to chase a bit when you have a sole rider out in front. But Wout van Aert is doing a tremendous ride.
27 seconds. He is holding it right now. Let's take a closer look at this. It looks as though Florian Sénéchal has started to do a little bit of the work. Behind here is Miguel Marco, so he's not going to be in the game if Quick Step Arthur Weindl are going to bring this back. And Wout van Aert moves to within 3 kilometres of the finish now. It has to move quickly, or you're looking at a man who has been second, and on his way to first. Lotto Soudal are now starting to work, so that suggests the presence of Caleb Ewan back in this group, Sean.
Yes, I think we have a lot of the sprinters here, and certainly Caleb Ewan has to be here, because Lotto Soudal are pushing on, and we can see there's just new riders coming to the front and pushing, and that just gives you an idea how strong Wout van Aert is. Still 23 seconds, is coming down, but coming down very slowly, and we're getting ever so close. 2.4 to go. It's looking good for him.
22 seconds with just over 2 kilometres to go. Any little bit of wind blowing is to the side and behind him, although he's coming into the sheltered part of town now and about to enter into Calais itself. We saw the green jersey of Fabio Jakobsen not too far from the front of that group. He's now illustrated on the graphic as being in that group, so he's there, and that's the reason why Quick Step Arthur Weindl were working. Now 2 kilometres from the finish, and it's 21 seconds. Coming down, but at what rate? Sénéchal is done for the day. Look at him on the left-hand side. He's given absolutely everything. Jakobsen, the sender there with Sagan. Alexander Kristoff has 2 men in front of him as well to chase. And you can just see the Jumbo-Visma jerseys waiting to try and disrupt things, Sean.
Yes, well, they're going to ride here on the front, and we see Cataneo just, taking it up here. But this is the problem, one rider just gives it all there and then pulls off. And in the meantime, we can see Jumbo-Visma just trying to obstruct the riders in the front, not allow the riders to get together, 2 or 3 who can relay each other, and they're doing a real good job. And 18 seconds, I think it's going to be a Van Aert stage win.
Well, Jumbo-Visma have been brilliant. They've been close with those 3 second places for the man on your screen. Flamme Rouge is coming quickly into view. 1 kilometre to go now for Wout van Aert, who has 16 seconds on those trying to chase him down with fury behind. It's been 4 hours of racing here in France on the first French day of the 109th Tour. And Wout van Aert, who leads the race, is trying to win his first stage of this year's 2022 Lap of France. We began in Denmark with fanfare and crowds. We've got the same here in Calais, and behind they're still too far to catch this man. Left turn is going to be the final turn for Wout van Aert. He attacked with his entire team with 10 kilometres to go. A big steep ramp of a climb. It brought back the memories of Paris-Nice. It was déjà vu for Jumbo-Visma, but here is Wout van Aert. They turn into the final corner behind the peloton, but they are not going to catch him now. No organisation, not enough firepower, not enough to catch the man who's going to win the stage. What a day, what a ride. And Van Aert is about to bring the Wout factor to the Tour de France. 3 second places, now a win wearing the yellow jersey. Deja vu and a deadly demonstration from Wout van Aert. Chasing on behind, it's going to be the sprint that's won by Jasper Philipsen, who celebrates. But surely he must have seen Wout van Aert winning in the yellow jersey in front of him.
No, I don't think you've seen him. He was probably in the wheels there, you know, just following. And, yeah, he definitely thinks he has won there. But Van Aert, we could see, you know, he was just flying there, and he was definitely flying in that final 10 kilometres.
Wout van Aert, winner of stage 4. Second on day 1. Runner-up on day 2. Second again on our final day in Denmark. We're in France, and Wout van Aert looking every little bit leader of the Tour.
On the right, on your right, please.
And winning in the yellow jersey in this fashion, a dream. And we all know teamwork makes the dream work. It certainly did today for Team Jumbo-Visma.
That is how you celebrate if you finally take a Tour de France stage win after 3 seconds in a row. And what a way to take it, Robbie. It was a thriller, wasn't it?
I mean, the wings at the end, it might be in reference to his sponsor or whatever,
I suspect so.
He took off on the climb. That was phenomenal. I mean, we talked about the Paris-Nice stage where they did 3 teammates off the front. That was even more impressive. On his own, burned everyone off, but used the whole team to light it up. If you could make that effort to go to the top of a climb, you'd get to the top. You wouldn't be able to pedal for half an hour after that. And he just goes on with another 10K solo to the finish. He's just unbelievable.
We're going to look at that attack on the climb in a moment, but what about Jasper Philipsen? He looked like he thought he'd won it, Dan.
Yeah, it's a shame for him that Van Aert was so camouflaged in that bright yellow skin suit about 200 metres in front of him.
And the man that everybody would have been watching out for.
I mean, I feel bad for Philipsen, you know. I guess he was probably there thinking, well, there's no way in hell that anybody could possibly be away with the speed that we've been going on the way into the finish line. Little did he know that Wout van Aert was on an extra human level today out front, and third place as well. Was that Laporte coming across the line in third? But yeah, with Van Aert, I don't know what I just witnessed. Like, if you take any one of the 176 riders from the Tour de France and pit them against the best amateur that you know locally, they'll make them look like a junior rider. Wout van Aert has made all these top professionals look like junior riders, like literally head and shoulders above the race. A first solo in that manner is absolutely incredible.
If you're just tuning in and you missed the end of the race and you're seeing Jasper Philipsen celebrating, don't be fooled. He finished in second in the end. I want to ask just quickly, how do you get that wrong?
I can't even speak about Philipsen. I'm in shock about Wout van Aert. Forget about him, he came second. I have never seen a rider do that in the yellow jersey and ever in the Tour de France. Attacking the climb, like you said, over the top, and then just keep going bam, bam, bam. That can't get grown.
Well, maybe in a mountain stage where we would expect it, but not like this.
I can't remember the last time I saw someone in the Tour de France demolish a peloton just on his own like that. I know he attacked with teammates on the climb, but best climbers in the world, Pogacar, nowhere to be seen. Teammates gone, Adam Yates gone, Vingegaard gone, all off his wheel. Then he just went, oh, God, fair enough, I'll get on with it. It's just incredible.
But this is the man who won last year a time trial, a sprint and a mountain
why are we
stage
shocked?
as well.
Why are we shocked?
That was still shocking. No matter what anyone's done before in their career, to watch that level of rider going ping, 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 ping on the way up the climb, unbelievable.
I think we're thrilled more than shocked, really, though, aren't we? I mean, that is a thrilling, exhilarating moment of sporting greatness to witness, Robbie, isn't it?
It was thrilling. Often you see someone attack and you sort of want to see them get caught and see a big bunch sprint, I think everybody was cheering for Wout van Aert because that attack deserved a huge victory, and the celebration was awesome as well. But I got to say, in Jasper Philipsen's defence, if there is any, he must have been thinking, we've been going so fast, there's no way in the world anyone could stay ahead of us. There's no way anyone could hold us off.
That is bad.
And then he would have come across and looked and seen Wout and gone, oh, yeah, forgot about him.
Yeah, I've got to say, we're not trying to belittle in any way Jasper Philipsen. You would have imagined his team are telling him from the team car what is happening and what he's sprinting for, surely.
I mean, it's not a Mickey Mouse race, is it? It's a Tour de France. They should explain what's happening. And even if you're further back, they expected him to be on the climb, they still should have said, right, one man out in front still. Bring it back.
Even if it didn't happen, he's got to say his earpiece came out and he was trying to win it.
It might explain why Alpes and Fenix didn't really do much of the chasing behind if none of them knew that there was somebody stood out front. But surely one of them knew. They've all got televisions in the team cars behind. They must have been on the... And these aren't the crowds of Denmark, which was so loud and so vast that it was hard to hear your race radio. Yes, they were going fast, a lot of wind noise in the ears. Surely one of them in that front group had got the call, we've still got to catch Wout van Aert if you want to go for the stage victory.
In any case, wow, Van Aert.
Very good. Let's hear from Wow Van Aert then, shall we? Our stage winner and yellow jersey.
Well, Van Aert, were you tired of bunch sprints?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to take the risk anymore.
What a performance. What an attack. Can you explain exactly how it all went? Because that was something.
Yeah, I think it was quite obvious that we were trying something with the team. We were in perfect position thanks to Nathan and Stevie. And then Nathan opened up on the climb, Tiesj took over, and I felt in the wheel already. It was super hard. And in the radio we heard there was some damage, so actually the goal was just to go full to the top and see what happened. But then I came on top alone, and I was a bit in doubt if I better wait for Jonas and I think it was Yates, two guys behind me. But by going full, I also put Jonas and the others in a good position, so they didn't have to ride. I decided to go alone, and then it was a 10K of all out suffering.
To win a stage with the yellow jersey, that's something. That must be really special.
Exactly.
Well, a team celebration, and what a team effort it was. As Wout says, they planned to go on the attack on that final climb. We knew it was coming, surely, after what they did, managed to pull off at Paris-Nice, Robbie. But I guess when you're that strong, you can know it's coming, but there's very little you can do about it.
Exactly. I mean, they positioned themselves perfectly. It was like watching one of the spring classics where you come into the bottom of the climb, you want to blow the race apart. But everybody knowing it's going to happen, but when there's that show of strength, there's really just not much anybody can do. I mean, everybody knew, Walt said, everybody knew what we were going to do. It was obvious what we were going to do.
We knew, because we said this morning. They're going to do this. So
basically, the entire Tour de France viewing world said Wout van Aert's going to attack on this climb and make it really hard. But to go away like that, it's still, even though it was obvious what was going to happen, it was surprising to see it happen with such a show of power.
Yeah, I wonder if we can watch it again and look at it a little bit more closely. Adam, if you can talk us through exactly how it happened.
Yeah, well, it was when we got onto the front of it, they had Van Hooydonk on the front, and he had Dylan van Baarle. He's openly said he's put on a little bit more weight so he can be more powerful on the flat. He's probably regretting that now. Then just behind Van Baarle, you've got Tiesj Benoot. This is the point where Tiesj takes over, starts to move up past Van Baarle, rides onto the wheel of Van Hooydonk, and you sit already 3 places up. There's Wout van Aert just sat on the wheel waiting to go. You can see Geraint Thomas behind, scrambling to get on the wheels. Adam Yates is sat pretty, but this is the point here, Dan, well, I missed it, and you corrected me saying, Primus is gone, and I missed it, and then shouted, Primus is gone. I think soon as that...
Geraint. You missed Geraint being dropped, but, I mean, again, just...
loads, then.
Geraint. Too busy getting excited about
It's okay. Everyone got dropped.
I mean, Geraint might not have quite the explosivity that he did, particularly before he won the Tour de France, and he concentrated on the classics, but still, he's a man, maybe not at the very top of his game compared to 2018, but he's not too far off. So for him to be in the wheel on that climb, 1 kilometre long, and to get spat out the back, it's not just him, Roglic, Vingegaard, everybody was spat out the back by Wout van Aert.
Where was Pogačar? for the first time ever. We've not seen
I think he must have started the climb quite a long way back, because over the top he was around about 10th place, but I imagine he started a long way further back than 10th place.
I think he's really struggling without the presence of Matteo Trentin to really place him in those classics-type moments, that he had to come from a long way back. But he's going well enough, of course, to get back to guys like Roglic. But the interesting thing was, when Wout van Aert had Adam Yates in his wheel and Vingegaard, and as Adam said, why wouldn't he have waited and maybe taken Vingegaard, get time? But I just think it's too early in the Tour to also take a rival in Adam Yates, no matter if he's not maybe the hugest threat on GC or not perceived as such. Still too dangerous to take him, and he would have just sat on and not worked anyway. And as Wout van Aert said, just go to the top, full gas, and then see what happens. And he was alone.
Well, Yates is now in 8th, I think, 48 seconds back. But I want to break down that argument between the two of you, and you both discussing as we were watching what you thought should happen on the climb. So, Adam, what did you think should have happened and why?
So Wout had Adam Yates behind him. He got distant and had Vingegaard behind him. So Wout's teammate, essentially, with him. I just, at that moment, I said, if he'd have waited then, got Vingegaard with him, them two could have worked together. Even if Yates sat on the back, you've got Pogačar in the race. We can't see him. They can't see him. You've got a cobbled stage tomorrow. If you have a flat tyre, that could be you. Bang, a minute gone. If you've gained 20 seconds already, that's only 40 seconds gone. I just think in this Tour de France against Pogačar, you rarely see him miss a beat. As soon as he misses a beat, you've got to take full opportunity of it. So I just think he's... The history tells he's stronger than everyone. He can always climb his way back. So why not take time when you can get it back? Because the race is so long that you might not be able to have that chance again. It's not by luck, but that situation may never come around again. And they could look back and go, oh, do you know what, if we'd have just rode together there, or whatever it might be. I'm not saying that was the wrong thing to do by Wout, but I think in that situation there, that could have really benefited Vingegaard. I'm happy he didn't see one.
There was an opportunity, but I think it's so layered how it could play out and what the tactics were. But I think also the fact that Wout's been told, and he said tomorrow on the cobble stage he's going to look after Roglic. The fact that Roglic wasn't there with Vingegaard and Yates, if he was, go ahead with all of them to the finish for sure. But Wout's riding for a win. He's been 3 times second. He wants to win green. This is his opportunity. Tomorrow is not, apparently. So that's the signal, just to go full, go ahead and not ride for any GC or, you know, try and shake that up. And it's also not the moment, I don't think, where you're going to win the Tour de France. Yes, you could strike a blow, but it's not going to be a winning moment. And Wout could have risked everything by having, say, Vingegaard and Yates with him. The chase behind would have been a lot more aggressive by other GC riders. It could have shut the whole thing down.
It must also be very difficult to make those decisions on the spot there, because right into the red, whoever you are, Wout van Aert included, a quick glance behind. Yes, he would have seen Vingegaard, and Yates might not have quite seen where Primož Roglic is, certainly wouldn't have seen where Pogačar was, or that he didn't have any teammates around him, because that's the thing. If they did go ahead with Vingegaard, Yates and Wout van Aert, it might well have been that Pogačar was like, I'm going to have to chase here on my own, unless the other sprinters' teams get their act together, at least been a part of the chase. That might then affect tomorrow's stage, or, of course, he wants to be alert and have good legs. So it's very easy for us to sit here and say, well, it might have been that they could have done this and still got Wout van Aert the win and the points for the green jersey, but incredibly difficult to make those decisions on the spot.
Matthew, what the hell's going on? Like, where's Van der Poel? I mean... That's perfect for today. Follow Wout. Where was he?
Well, this is what I was saying.
From the Giro?
I was asking you all off air earlier whether it was worth holding Mathieu back, essentially, today for a sprinter who's not the very best in the world, although he would have won if Wout hadn't have been there today. But surely that would have been a day... He thought he won, but you would have thought today would be one that would suit Mathieu van der Poel. And this is the danger, I think, with Alpecin sometimes, having the strength of Mathieu van der Poel, but not always going for him.
I get this feeling that the team's holding him back. I really get the feeling. And we've had the calls where...
where might you have got that from? Is it the fact that he attacked on every single one of the 21 Giro stages and he's not attacked once here?
But it's exactly that. But it's... They're holding him back on for a stage that is such a gamble. Such a gamble. You know, he could go into that cobbles first section tomorrow, double flat, might never see the front again. He's wasted 5 days of trying something. Maybe
it's OK, he can win the day after.
3 less. But, you know, it's that... For me, it's you can't hold a guy like that back. You can't just say, forget about all the other stages. Today, we know he would have been there if tomorrow wasn't on the cards. But what's the difference in holding Mathieu van der Poel back? He's Van der Poel. Let him go play. Yeah,
it's sad to see, isn't it, when he lights up the race as he did almost every stage in the Giro d'Italia. And I guess they're trying to get him to ride more cleverly, but not quite as much fun, is it? Well, after the break, we are going to talk about tomorrow's stage and the prospect of those cobbles. If you're watching on digital, there is plenty more chat to come, of course. I just love that new victory. It must obviously be because of his sponsor. It's a clever little victory salute there. We were talking about Mathieu van der Poel. I wanted to just ask you briefly, Adam, to follow on what we were discussing and the permutations of any different kind of a tactic on the climb. Would you have risked Primoz Roglic and distancing Roglic in stage 4 to keep Vingegaard safe and to distance Pogačar?